If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
People, if you've ever encountered the paranormal, demons, shadow beings, or other strange phenomena in your house or believe it's seriously haunted, share your scariest story.
I was 16 at the time and home alone. I walked to my bedroom and wrapped myself in a blanket. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, on the phone with a friend. I felt a tug on my blanket, enough to jerk my head back a bit. Still on the phone, I look around and then under my bed. Nothing. I thought it might have been my cat. I look in the hallway. Nothing. I see my cat outside through my bedroom window. No one is home. I sit back down on my bed and start to tell my friend, "Hey, something weird just happened." And at that moment, my entire blanket flew off me. I say, I got to go, buy in one breath and book it to my aunt's house a block away. I never found out what happened. Years ago, I lived in a trailer with my boyfriend. It was in a formally sketched area, but before we moved there, they had really cleaned up the area. I'm an avid reader and would often stay up late at night because I have trouble sleeping. I was sitting on the couch reading when I got an overwhelming, scared feeling. I mean the heart-pumping fight or flight feeling. I heard a low growl and looked up and around where I'm sitting to see if I could hear it again. Honestly, I thought maybe my sleeping boyfriend farted in the bedroom, and I was being paranoid. I heard the low growl again. At this point, I'm frozen, and I look over at my TV, which was off, and can see a demonic face. The eyes were yellow and like a cat's eyes, the face was red with black stripes down it, and the horns reminded me of ram's horns with the thickness and the curl. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. So I jumped up and went towards the bedroom and woke my boyfriend up and told him we needed to get out. We were running through the living room when he saw what I saw and was like, "What the heck is that?" At this point the lights flashed, and we took off running out the door and didn't return until morning. We moved right after that. A few years ago, my mom was sleeping downstairs, bad idea, and she had an encounter with something inhuman. Anyways, I used to always get scared at night and knock on their door to sleep with them, and one night my mom heard a knock on her door, and she assumed it was me, so she said, "Come in." While still half asleep, she heard the door open and heard something quickly patter across the ground and jump on the bed, and it began whispering in her ear, mimicking her voice. She freaked out and opened her eyes only to see a very skinny, small, web-looking creature running out of the room. Me and my dad awoke to her screaming. We believe the house was haunted because we all had paranormal experiences in the house. We believe it came to be haunted because the previous owners were drug addicts who performed satanic rituals, etc. When I showed her the picture of that Skinwalker picture that kind of went viral, she said they looked really similar, but we don't know if this was a Skinwalker or a malevolent spirit. Woman looking like a demon peeking around a door. I've never had any kind of paranormal experience but generally have always believed. So the other week I was sitting on a friend's sofa facing his living room door while he had his back to it. Out of nowhere I saw a long pair of grayish fingers creep round the door and a woman I can only describe as the woman from Shutter Island, literally Google Shutter Island woman and it should show you exactly what I saw, poked her head around briefly, scanned the room, locked eyes with me, and suddenly turned and disappeared from my line of sight. The weirdest thing is that another friend walked through the door almost instantly after she disappeared and swears blind there was no one there. I was so sure that someone was in the house, we looked in every room twice. I've tripped before years ago, so I know what that feels like, and even then you don't see entities with the vivid clarity I saw her with. The strangest thing is that two of my friends have seen an entity poking its head around doors in different locations, and I spoke to them both separately while holding back most of the story, and both of them filled in the gaps, ensuring me they're telling the truth. Do I have to be worried, and how should I deal with her if she returns? Back in the 70s, when I was growing up, my family would sit in our basement and all watch TV together. One evening, when I was about 13 years old, I went upstairs to make myself something to eat. As I was in the kitchen preparing my food, I heard the sound of slow and deliberate footsteps coming towards me through our living room, which is out of sight from where I was standing. As the footsteps got closer and louder, I leaned around the corner where I should have been face to face with whoever it was, and the sound stopped and no one was there. Freaked out, I ran down the stairs to tell my family what happened. My mother just chuckled and said, "Oh, that is just our ghost, I've been hearing him for years. He walks past my bedroom every night and sometimes rattles the blinds." About a year later, my brother, who is 4 years older than me, and I were in the house alone, cutting pictures from Playboy magazines my brother had, at the kitchen table. My sister was babysitting next door. Suddenly, we heard slow, very loud footsteps coming slowly up the stairs. We both looked at each other in shock. We knew no one else was in the house because we were just downstairs earlier, and there was no other way into the house except for the back door, which was 3 steps down, then a landing, a 90-degree turn to another 10 or 12 steps to the basement. As the footsteps got to the landing, we sprinted out of the front door and over to our neighbor's house, where our sister was babysitting. We called the man on the other side of our house and asked him to go over and check ours because of what we heard. We went back over while he was finishing checking the house, and he said no one was there. We moved out in 1979, and I have never had any ghost experiences since. When I was in high school, my family had rented a house from the 80s that had not been updated. I'm talking OG stove and microwave and spooky floor-to-ceiling mirror at the end of a long hallway. I used to hear footsteps in the attic all the time. My brother swore he heard footsteps the first night we moved in. Back then, I would get home from school about 2 hours before anyone else. One day, I sat at the kitchen table to start my homework when I heard the footsteps again. I tried to ignore it but got this sickening feeling of dread. The tension quickly built, and I felt my hair stand on end in a brief silence before there was a bunch of frantic stomping in circles directly above me. I bolted out the back door and called my dad, sobbing. I sat on the back porch and made him stay on the phone with me for the whole hour he was driving home from work. When he got home, he immediately checked the crawl space in the attic, and we found an old plastic turtle sandbox but nothing else. I started going to the gym those 2 hours after that. On the upside, I did get hella fit that year. Something is running around the house. Demonic activity. When I was around 9, my father was fixing up our house, with 2 rooms on the left, a hallway in the middle, and another room and a bathroom on the right. One night, he took off all the doors, leaving just curtains in their place. While I watched TV in their room, I heard my dad from the living room asking me where I was, claiming he saw a dark shape of a kid run from my room to theirs, right to left, and that he saw the movement on the curtains as well. We brushed it off, thinking it was just the wind or our imagination. Later, my sister, 8 at the time, said she saw a snake-like shadow outside her window. I asked her for more details, and she said it was something big, not a snake, but it moved like one. I thought she was making it up, and then we went to bed. After like 5 minutes of turning the lights off, my sister screamed and started crying. I could hear my parents asking her, from their room, "What's wrong?" but she wasn't answering, so my dad asked me to go check. I guess he was scared lol, so I go from my room all scared and pick her up on my arms and take her to mine. The next morning, my mom asked her what happened, and she said she was awake, looking at the ceiling, and then she realized there was a figure, like a weird shape. When she finally was about to see what it was, she said it was a kid with sharp teeth and horns, and then the kid jumped on her. A lot of things like this kept happening to her until she was maybe 16, where she would see things right after someone else saw a shape. I work at a cemetery and had replaced veteran markers with brand new ones at Pioneer Memorial Cemetery in Phoenix. Later on that night, I went home and was sitting with my daughter when I heard a loud crash. We both thought it was strange and went to investigate. When we got to the kitchen, we heard another crash and then footsteps. We crouched in the kitchen until it was completely quiet. After we decided it was safe, we sat on my bed and really just reflected on the situation. I said it was so strange, and then we heard the deepest, creepiest voice saying something to us in a low growl. You could actually tell whatever it was directing their communication to us. Then we stared at each other. My daughter was terrified, so I tried to play it off, and then heard a big sigh. We bolted and waited in the parking lot at Walmart until my husband got off work. True story. Peoria, Arizona. A couple of days ago, when I had just gotten back from school, my mom was sitting there, freaked out. I asked her what was wrong, and she said that she was in the backyard, by an old oak tree. Back there is meant to be a memorial for the previous owner's mom. We just kind of kept it. I've never noticed anything weird about it other than the rustling of leaves, which is easily explained by the fact that we live by a forest. But anyway, my mom had never taken Minnie, my dog, back there since we moved there. But anyway, my mom said Minnie was acting weird and wasn't barking, running, or playing, which is odd because she is a very hyperactive dog. Things got even weirder when my mom heard my voice, clear as day, say, "Minnie, where are you?" My mom said she went around to the front to check if my dad had driven me back home yet and the car wasn't there. She went inside and unhooked the dog from her leash, who started acting pretty normal again, but couldn't find me. And then she said she heard the car pull up and then looked out the window and saw me, tired, open the door, and walk out. As if things couldn't get any weirder, we were joking about this kind of thing at school. Now I realize that isn't something to joke about. My friend has a demon in her home. Need advice? I have a friend. Let's say her name is Sami. Sami has 2 kids and a husband, and they live in rural Michigan. She has explained to me in detail how she has always seen things since she was a kid that would scare her and that she started seeing them again. She had family die and tried communicating with them when she was really young. She said she was able to get responses. She recently moved. In her new house, she thought the problem would be gone. When moving in, she said clear as day you could hear footsteps upstairs. She thought it was her husband, but when she went to investigate, nobody was home at all. Not only that, her in-law explained seeing a dark figure in her doorway, the same thing Sami said would happen to her as a kid. She was convinced that it wasn't in her head when her in-law said something. She said it was always a dark figure. It appears to her when she dreams, but she has recently started seeing it again in her own home. Her babies have bruises and scratches that cannot be explained, as they have no animals, and she's always keeping an eye on them. She has shown me the bruises she has gotten on her ankle area, and she just would chalk it up to her bumping things. It has been appearing more often to her and even started opening and shutting doors. Her babies have recently got scratches on their backs. There are bruises she cannot describe. Recently, her daughter has been screaming in her crib in the middle of the night. She is investing in a camera for the baby room to try and catch this thing on camera. She has had 2 priests bless the home, but the activity is getting worse. Her husband has tried to clean with sage and has even written prayers above the doorways. Nothing seems to work. It sounds chalked up like a movie, right? I have no idea how to help my friend. Is there any advice on what she can do? Encounters in my childhood home. My parents purchased their home from my grandmother. It was a small 2-bedroom house that would later be updated to 3 bedrooms. In my first bedroom in that house, I heard someone strongly whisper hello while wearing headphones just in my right ear. I thought it was a part of the song, so I tried rewinding it to hear it again and calm my nerves, but I couldn't hear the whisper again. My sister, who my grandmother says inherited the family gypsy curse, would inherit my old room next and would come out in the middle of the night complaining that someone was watching her sleep. We didn't think much of it until 15 years later. My little half-brother inherited the room with the same complaint. Someone was watching him while he slept. When my sister was preschool aged, she would complain of an evil-looking colonially dressed man and woman standing at the back door, staring in the door's window, and tell me not to invite them in. During the day we would play in the backyard, and she would tell me that colonially dressed people were picking apples. Later, I learned that the entire area was an old apple orchard a few centuries ago. There was no way my sister would have that knowledge at her age. Hunched, winged, gargoyle-like thing on stairs. Hi. I've got a kind of strange thing that's bugged me for going on for probably 10 years now. So growing up, I always felt like my parents' house was haunted. I always experienced weird things, saw shadows, and just felt very uneasy. I also experienced sleep paralysis very frequently. I didn't know what it was back then, and I thought I was being specifically targeted. At night, it was like a black cloud hovering around the ceiling of the bedrooms, and I kind of remember seeing eyes. I also always got a very uncomfortable feeling going into the basement and coming back up. Like the black cloud from nighttime was chasing me up the stairs or something. Anyways, these were normal experiences for me growing up as they were so frequent. However, there was this one time that really freaked me out, and I cannot for the life of me find any kind of information on it. So what happened was, I was about 16 years old. Old enough to drive anyway. My parents were out in town for the night, and I'd met them there for a bit on my way home from work and then proceeded to go back myself. It was winter time, and to save heat, we had blocked off the second story of our house. I had to get something that was in my upstairs bedroom, so I opened the partition we had blocking off the stairs. When I opened the partition, there was this thing sitting on the stairs. The best way I can describe it was like a gargoyle. It was hunched over and just sitting there on the stairs, eye level. It was big, adult-sized, but scrawny. Dark. Had wings. I can't recall if it made a noise. I freaked out and ran and locked myself in another room while I called my parents. I was in full panic mode. It was a sight I had never witnessed before or since. It still bugs me to this day. I remember it so vividly. And being that this was about 10 years ago, my younger sister has since described something similar. I had never told her that story before. I have searched and searched, and the only things I can find are things about the Mothman or about gargoyles outside. Anyways, I thought I'd share because it still bugs me to this day. I am wondering if anybody else has experienced something similar. My parents either don't believe in or are just in denial of whatever is going on there, but I know what I saw. Red door, yellow door experience. First, let me say, do not try this. I was so skeptical, and I thought it was complete bullshit until we tried it, and I will never mess with demonic shit like this ever again. So I was at my friend's beach house, and it was me, her, and my sister. They decided to play red door, yellow door, and I was the one that recorded the entire thing. My friend lied down in my sister's lap, and we followed detailed instructions from online on how to play the game. We turned all the lights off, and my sister chanted red door, yellow door, or any other color door for about 7 minutes. My friend had her eyes closed and was in a deeply relaxed state. Almost like a trance. My sister asked her if she saw anything, and my friend said she saw a yellow rectangle that resembled a door. So we kept going until she said she saw an extremely dark hallway. My sister told her to walk through it, and my friend said she saw a yellow door. We were unaware that yellow doors are dangerous and should not be entered. It means the game went wrong and we should have woken her up from her trance. This is when things started going wrong. She walked through the door and said she saw a room full of TV static. She walked out and saw a woman in a Victorian nightgown, frail with no face in the hall. We discovered that was also experienced by lots of other people, and that seeing that woman meant we should have woken her up and that the game went wrong. But we didn't know, so we kept going. She said she saw another yellow door and approached it, but as soon as she said that, she began squirming, and my sister told her not to go in if she felt uncomfortable, which is what the rules said. She then saw a tall man in the hall wearing black fancy attire, and that was the one thing we knew was dangerous. She said he appeared at the end of the hall, and she didn't feel afraid because 1, he wasn't in a room he could trap her in. He was standing in the hall far from her, and 2, my friend is just really brave and rarely gets scared. However, right after this, she screamed and began seizing, so we woke her up. She said he randomly appeared in her face, almost like a jump scare in a movie. Anyway, I don't know how the game works, and if you read the detailed rules about it, you won't believe it's real either. But everything that people said would happen happened. I honestly couldn't sleep last night trying to figure out how this shit works. People say it's hypnosis, but how did my friend see everything that everyone else saw? And we didn't even know what others saw until we looked it up after the game. So this happened over my aunt's house in Detroit. My grandma, my aunt's husband, and their 6-month-old baby all lived there. My mom and 3 other siblings are visiting. My sister is 18, I'm 12, and my little brother and sister were 5 and 3. Now the house had 2 rooms and 1 basement. My uncle slept in the basement with an air mattress. My grandma has asthma, and she has her own room, across from my aunt's room, and my auntie and little cousin sleep in the other room. BTW, to get downstairs, you have to go through the kitchen to get there. So I was getting tired and I had to sleep downstairs, so I went and laid on a separate air mattress. About 30 minutes later, I hear footsteps circling me. I was scared but just went back to sleep, then I heard more footsteps, and I was then pissed off. So I get from over the cover to see a face smiling at me. I went back under the covers and went to sleep. When I woke up, I told my auntie, and she said that an old woman had fallen down the stairs and died in the basement. I will never forget that night. My friend's house. Fall 2022, I spent the night at a friend's house in their 2nd floor spare room before a road trip. We were aiming to be on the road at 4 a.m., and I had fallen asleep around 10 p.m. I was sober. For context, when I have to be up early for something important like a job interview, first day of work, flight, etc., I do not sleep well. I am prone to waking up at all hours, paranoid that I have somehow missed my alarm. So it wasn't unusual that I suddenly woke up and worriedly looked at my phone, thinking I overslept. I felt better after seeing the time, 2:31 a.m., and nestled back into bed. I was still alert for the next few minutes from the anxiety/adrenaline of being potentially late and was trying to will myself back to sleep with my eyes shut. Then I felt the bed sink down by my feet. I was on my side in the fetal position, facing away from the door. It felt like the weight of a person was sitting in the crook of my knees. I always thought I would keep a level head with a ghostly encounter because the idea has always excited me, but it turns out I was terrified. My heart started pounding, and I kept my eyes closed because the hallway light was on and I did not want to see any kind of shadow, not a damn thing. I stayed like that until I eventually drifted off to sleep. I also kept this experience to myself so I wouldn't freak my friend out or have her husband make fun of me. Until a few weeks later at her Oktoberfest party, when I drunkenly spilled the beans, thinking they would think it was a funny story. Immediately, she shouted, "I knew it," and ran to get sage and start smudging the house. She explained she sometimes heard work boots stomping around upstairs while she was working from home but didn't want to believe it. We started laughing hysterically while she's saging and her husband is rolling his eyes and laughing, and after we settle down we go to bed like normal, me in the spare room. Nothing happened in the spare room that night. The next morning over coffee she mentioned that the man who built the house in the 50s died on the property, something like a heart attack while he was mowing the lawn, and that she would like to think he's just checking to make sure they are taking good care of it. She lives in another state, so I don't see her often, but I know they've started some construction, and I'm a little paranoid about what, if anything, will happen the next time I stay over. I work in a funeral home. I have for at least 5 years now. One night, about a year ago, I was working at night, with everyone else gone, including the caretaker. I turned off all superfluous lights and settled into my office, right at the end of a long corridor with 2 rooms off of it. One at the end of the corridor and one next to the office, to watch some Netflix as nothing was going on that night. After about an hour, I hear the door at the end of the hallway open, and I think it's just the caretaker coming back from a night out. I take my flashlight and look, and illuminated, half in the doorway, is a man, human height, but he looks as though he's made of a dark smoke. There is nothing distinct about it other than the way it moved, like ink in water, and its orange, pupilless eyes. It felt like it was staring through me as I turned and ran back into my office, terrified. As I had my back turned, I heard the heavy door slam shut, like someone had closed it with enormous force. A little later, once the caretaker had come back for real and was sitting chatting with me, all the lights in that room came on, and we could both see them under the door. We both went to investigate, and in the center of the room, beneath the chandelier, was the inky shadow that looked at both of us, and then all the light bulbs burned out in the room at once. The caretaker turned on his phone flashlight, and in that moment of darkness, it was gone. We replaced all the bulbs, and I went home for the rest of the night and forgot about it. A month later, in the dead of night in my own home, I woke up because my door creaked and scraped open. A figure made of shadow, child height, was staring into my room with green eyes. My door clicked shut when it noticed me watching, then I pulled my covers over my head and felt like I was being watched until it was time for work that morning. In December, I was driving on my way to work when I saw a shadow thing with yellow eyes staring at me from the window of an abandoned house along my route. Is it following me? What the hell is it? Why does it look and act differently each time I notice it? A demon or something sits outside my house occasionally around 3 a.m. Alright, so I didn't know where to share this, but I genuinely want to know if anybody has had a similar occurrence like this happen to them. This happened a little less than a year ago. I live in a pretty rural area, quiet and secluded from people on a fruit orchard. So one morning I woke up at 3:37 a.m., and my immediate thought was shit, it's way too early to be up. I then prepared a bowl pack to hopefully send me off to catch some more sleep a bit easier, but when I went to go outside, I stepped out onto our deck and turned the light on. I swear on everything I love to this day, whatever I heard scared the absolute shit out of me to the point where I locked every single window and door in the house and don't even have the will to smoke the bowl to calm my nerves. I was honestly so terrified. So when I stepped out onto my deck, I heard in a tree that the deck light just barely partially illuminated, the leaves started to rustle a bit, a branch snapped, and what literally sounded like it had to be a 400-plus-pound animal hopped down from the tree, land with a huge thud, and I can remember hearing exactly 7 steps, but where the last step was easily reached over 50 yards away from the tree. At this point, I'm practically shitting my pants. I go to reach my phone to start recording when whatever it was lets out the most god-awful screech I've ever heard. It sounded like a mix of an ear-piercing hawk screech mixed with the deep scream of a bull or something. It almost had a human but also totally inhuman sound to it. After I heard this, I instantly went inside, turned on both outside lights, and locked everything. I to this day truly believe a demon or something was stalking me outside my house. What do you guys think? Hey guys, typing from Trenton, Ontario, and I'm currently scared shitless. There's been so many occurrences of this stuff happening, but today was just not it? I decided I wasn't going to sleep for school the following morning, as I do sometimes. But tonight, I had a very, very odd vibe coming from my room's window. I'm usually not the type to be frightened by my window, but today I just couldn't look at it, and there was a haunting feeling coming from it. I kind of brushed it off today, so I called a friend on Discord and played some video games. Where I play video games, the window is directly behind me, and I can generally hear what's going on behind me. About every 10 minutes, I would hear a clicking noise, 2 clicks, to be precise. My room is on the 2nd story, and there aren't trees relatively close enough to create the noise. So each time I heard it, I would sort of try and make an excuse for it. Oh, it's just a squirrel or oh, maybe it's water. But after listening carefully each time, I came to notice that it was most definitely not that. Later on, at around 3:54 a.m., my friend left the call to sleep. I was just sort of vibing watching TikToks, and then I started hearing rapid tapping. The tapping was so mortifyingly human that I froze and continued to listen to the tapping. I then recognized a 5-finger tapping pattern. I was so horrified. I sat for maybe 15 minutes straight, not looking anywhere but exactly where I'd frozen. After calming myself down and finally letting myself breathe, I got up, not making eye contact with any wall or window, and I went to a room with no windows and vibed for a bit. I finally went back to my room at around 4:50 a.m. I went and laid in bed, and as soon as my head hit the pillow, I heard muffled howling/barking coming from my forest. Usually I would just brush it off as my neighbor's dog Layla, but it didn't sound like a dog, it didn't sound like Layla. It couldn't be wolves or coyotes because they never cross a certain part of the forest, which is surprisingly closer to the 401 highway. At this point I was really freaked out, and I just tried to continue my morning. That's really where the odd stuff ends for that night. But that was definitely not the first time this SHT has happened. We have a really old house. My parents think it's ghosts as they've heard things mock them. Weird laser lights being pointed around in our house, whispering, black shadows hovering over my crib, and an old British lady calling out names. See, I agree with all that, but I think the thing lurking in the forest by my window is different. Another weird thing that I've found is that when we redid the insulation for my room/drywall, underneath the insulation was 50s clothes, old newspapers, and weird-ass signs like the pagan spray painted in black, a goat's head, and a bunch of gibberish words. We covered it up, but it sort of haunts me to know what lies beneath the wallpaper. So, yeah, if any of you or anyone can help me identify these strange occurrences, that would be great. And maybe some methods to prevent whatever lies in my forest from killing me and my family? Anyway, thank you for listening. It was 1998. I was 8 years old and visiting my dad's childhood home. The town where he grew up was so tiny that you could drive through it within 10 minutes. I still remember the smell of steak from the mom and pop owned restaurant, the sweet cookies from the bakery, and even the cigarette smoke from the hair salon that my grandma used to run out of her basement from 15 years earlier. The house had to have been built in the early 1900s. The floors creaked, and there were vines all over the front of the house that my dad wanted to rid of, but my grandma liked the way they looked. Gave her privacy, she said. My brothers slept in my dad's old room, which was primarily blue. I remember the Chicago sports team posters on the wall, edges torn and frayed from time, and the occasional water damage. Out of the 2 remaining rooms, I chose my grandmother's linen room, and my parents took the spare room downstairs. I remember the room being frilly. White frilly curtains matched the white lace comforter on the bed. Her sewing machine was in the far right corner, in front of the window, where she would watch my dad play in the backyard. My dad playfully whispered, "That's the haunted room." My dad was and still is a jokester. I remember scrunching my nose at him and putting my suitcase on the floor in front of the bed. Little did I know, he wasn't kidding. That night I remember falling asleep easily. My biggest worry was that I would wake up in a puddle from my 4-year-old sister, who shared the bed with me. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and looking around. Everything was dark except for the dim light that came from the bathroom down the hallway. The shadows from the sewing machines hit the wall and looked like boxcars. I turned over to face the left side of the room, and that's when I saw her. At first I thought it was my mom. A silhouette of a woman was standing in the doorway of the room. She was wearing a white dress. My mom didn't wear dresses, not even a nightgown. She had long, fine hair. My mom had the typical fluffy 90s do cut at her shoulders. I quickly realized this wasn't my mom, and panic set in. She was all white, skin, hair, dress, everything. I remember she had a subtle glow about her. She was leaning on the doorframe, watching us sleep. Her head was tilted to the side, resting in her right hand that was being supported by her elbow against the frame. I wasn't scared. She was terrifying but comforting at the same time. It was like she was watching her own children sleeping, lovingly. I remember closing my eyes and praying she wouldn't come near me. She never did. The next morning, I went to the kitchen, where my grandma was already awake making us breakfast. Waffles with several different syrups and a huge bowl of assorted fruit. I didn't talk or eat much for the majority of breakfast, and my dad definitely took notice. After a few minutes of coaxing, I finally told him what I saw. He immediately looked at my grandma and said, "Ha! I told you." So before I start saying anything, me and my friend are both Christians, if that means anything. Growing up, I would often stay over there, as we both lived in the same neighborhood and would often hang out with each other. This means I would stay over there often, and all the times when I was younger were perfectly fine, nothing bad at all. This all started happening about a year or 2 ago, and whenever I stayed there, I would get some feeling like someone was watching me. I shrugged it off because I thought it was just my mind. My friend also has said before that every night at about 2:15 to 2:45 am he often hears footsteps from the upstairs. He has been there and heard it before, but knowing he has a dog, I assumed that was the culprit or it was just the time the house would settle. My friend also told me a bit ago that he was sleeping one night when he woke up and told me that he apparently saw a spirit or something that looked human float through his wall and through the other. I kind of thought he was messing around at the time. But one of my most recent times was different. I was playing Rocket League with him, and I kept seeing these shadow figures out of the corner of my eye. Note that there is a sort of hallway-like door there, but it doesn't lead to a hallway but rather a pinball table. They seemed more detailed than what would happen if it was just a brain trick, and they kind of moved away from the hallway entrance. I again just assumed it was my mind playing tricks, but over time it felt like they were just getting closer, and the feeling of getting watched was getting worse. I still played cool because I didn't want to freak out his little brother, who was hanging out with us at the time. His little brother went to bed at about 4:30 am, and we were about to go to bed, so I was watching him finish his game. But this is where I got it the worst. I kept seeing the figures run into the middle of the room and disappear. It would freak me out each time and give me horrible chills. My friend noticed and asked why I'm acting weird, but I just said I'm tired. We went to his room, and he turned off the lights. As he went to his bed, he laughed and said that as he turned off the light, he saw a shadow person, and his eyes were playing tricks. This freaked me out, and I jolted to turn the light on. I told him everything, and we both got freaked out, and until we were able to sleep at 6:30 am, I just felt like the worst evil the entire time. Now the most recent thing I heard happened while I wasn't there, but his little brother got a fever, so he slept upstairs near a Christmas tree. My friend also decided to sleep up there with him. He said his brother woke up and started having a freak out, and he said the man by the tree kept saying he was going to kill and bury his family. Is this a ghost or demon or something, or could it just be a coincidence? I was visiting my grandparents, and I went to their house. Their house is quite old, although I'm not sure exactly how old. They have dumb waiters in the walls, so I can only assume they are pretty old. The upstairs always had an odd vibe ever since I was a kid, but I never thought much of it. This time though, I recognized it as might be a ghost, so I asked if anyone was up there, rambled for a bit, and made contact. I was upstairs in the guest room, playing guitar, when I saw a figure in the mirror in my peripheral vision. Very pale, not tall, mousy brown blonde hair. Short like a pixie cut, but like she has cut it herself, as a lock was jagged like it was chopped with a pair of scissors. She was wearing a blue dress. She was looking at me from the mirror whenever I played the guitar. Every time I would see her in my peripheral vision and I'd turn, no one was there. I asked her if she wanted to watch me play guitar, although she said that she couldn't follow me afterwards. I think she liked watching me play guitar. She looked youngish, like 19 with a blank expression. It looked sort of similar to me. I'm at my grandpa's while writing this, and I feel an odd feeling in the side of my head. I think she's standing in the doorway. It didn't happen to me, but to my dad. I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water, and my dad walks into the room and asks me if I had used the bathroom in my parents' bedroom. Tell him no and that I've been in my room. I could tell something was off when I saw the look of fear on his face. He told me that someone was in the bathroom, and it wasn't my mom or my brother because they were asleep. I asked him what he was talking about. He told me he was going to use the bathroom, but he heard loud noises, so he stood by the door, which was open, but didn't walk in because he didn't understand what was going on. He said he thought that for whatever reason someone was using the toilet with the door open, so he continued to wait by the door confused, but then he said that he realized it sounded like something different, that it was too loud to be someone using the toilet, and that it sounded like someone was vomiting into the toilet because he heard splashing. Then he said he heard the sound of a man gagging and clearing his throat, so he gets concerned and peeks into the bathroom, and nothing. The noises were gone, and no one was there. He said he knew what he heard was real, and it was so real that he had to check behind the bathroom door to make sure that no one broke in, and then he checked the shower, and he said his jaw dropped. He saw soapy water and dirt all over the floor of the shower. He says he doesn't know how to explain what happened, and neither do I. If anyone knows what this is about or has any logical explanation, I'd love to hear. I grew up in a haunted house. When I finally returned during college, there were so many times where I would just sit in my car staring at the house and convincing myself nothing was there. On one of my first trips back home, when I was about 18, I walked into the empty house alone. Within minutes, the house went crazy. Footsteps, very common for my house, the bathroom door opened, an overwhelming sense of dread, and of course the brief shape of a man outside my bedroom door. Even though I would consider this a mild encounter, I had gotten so used to living in a dorm where it finally felt empty from spirits that I was so overwhelmed and sprinted out of the house. I sobbed in my car and waited until my dad got home. I even filmed myself and talked about the experience because I wanted to remember how real it all was when I went back to school. I deleted the video years later, but I still remember the primal fear, but also relief, of running out of the house. Nowadays, the house is much quieter when I visit, but I have so much pent-up fear from my childhood that I always count down the days until I can go back to my own house. I consider myself lucky that I was able to find another home as an adult and be able to escape the feeling. A hag roamed around my house in the night. Anytime we have holidays, my older brother, my dog, and I take a long trip over to our grandmother's house. This particular visit took place over autumn break when I was 12 years old. The first few days of break were great. I spent my time reading books I had brought with me and browsing through gossip magazines. One morning, however, my brother got a very bad rash that needed medical attention that the town was not able to provide. That same morning, my brother and grandmother were forced to get in the car and drive to the nearest hospital, which was a long way away. Pretty soon it became clear that they weren't going to be back by nightfall and I would spend the night alone in the big, dark house with no one to keep me company except for my dog, whose name is Polaris. I had always been afraid of specific parts of the house, such as the basement and the attic. Although at night the whole house would become engulfed in darkness with many shadowy corners and corridors, due to this, I would be reluctant to go carry out my nightly routine or other tasks in the dark. This night was no different. I turned on the light in my second-floor bedroom, closed the door, and resolved to stay there until morning. To my misfortune, it wouldn't be as simple as that. I was sitting in bed reading, Polaris snoring soundly by my side, when I heard slow, quiet thumps on the stairs. My first instinct was that I was imagining things, but I was still frightened enough to nudge Polaris awake. Instantly, he perked his ears up and started growling. Now I knew I wasn't imagining the sound, but the fact that Polaris was now growling unsettled me even more since he is a happy dog that would greet even a stranger by the door as if a long-lost friend. The thumps were loud and clear now, and I thought that someone must have broken in and was climbing the stairs slowly. But I knew that that couldn't be true. I hadn't heard anyone come in, and I had made sure to call my grandmother and brother before settling in bed. Eventually, the thumps stopped, but I didn't dare open my bedroom door to ease the tension. I was too scared to come face to face with something I could have avoided. In a couple of hours, I was able to fall asleep, although I am not sure how long that lasted before I was awoken to a creaky corridor door being swung open. Once again, it was slow but definite. My heart was beating so fast and loudly that it made it harder to hear what was going on. But nevertheless, I heard the wooden floor right outside my bedroom creak and then slowly walk away into the next room. I fell asleep in short fever-like intervals. The dreams I was having couldn't be described as anything short of demonic. Yet the thing I remember to this day is the old woman that I saw in many of those dreams. She had very small, beady eyes and messy gray hair. She kept trying to touch me around my waist, my hair, my arms, everywhere. And as often happens in dreams, I couldn't get away. Due to the hag I dreamt, I am inclined to believe that it may have been her walking around the house. If you think you can provide any insight into this experience, please do. I really would be glad to hear anything similar you have gone through. The dark figures. One night it was around 3 a.m. and I was reading in my bed when suddenly I heard a deep voice whisper to me in my room. I have never experienced anything like this before, and I knew I wasn't hallucinating. I shuffled up quickly and scrambled backwards off my bed. Astonished, I looked around. The entire atmosphere of my room suddenly began to change. It started to become dense, and the lights softly dampened. It felt like being in a strange fog. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a boy appeared before me, and he was a dark black figure in the midst. His body was transparent and three-dimensional. He had very dark clothes with very dark features, and he looked to be about 7 years old. His face was so dark that you couldn't make it out. He slowly started walking towards me from across the room. I stared dead frozen. He continued to walk towards me until he actually walked past me and reached for my door. I took a few steps back. He then placed his hand through the wood of the door and rotated his left hand from right to left, and as he did this, he slowly took his other hand and raised it up above his head and materialized a three-dimensional black transparent orb. He then slowly placed it on the floor. Then he stood up and turned to me and put his finger up to what I assume were his lips and shushed me. He then turned back towards the door and then placed his ear to it as if he were listening for something. Then the orb started to suddenly float from amidst the fog toward me, and I knew I had to get the hell out of there, but it was blocking the door. So I went into the bathroom and locked it. I waited for a while and then opened the bathroom door again, but slowly, to see if everything was gone. The boy was. The orb had disappeared, but now there was something else there hanging from the ceiling light above my bed. A figure a lot older and heavier. I walked over to it and instantly recognized it was me, but I was dark and transparent with no face like the boy's was. I was rotating left and right with the rope around my neck. I looked lifeless. I had mass. I then found him. In our house now. It started with some deodorant cans sounding like they were being pushed around in our room in the middle of the night. We thought we had a mouse. We have tried to find evidence of mice but can't find anything. Now this one we have tried to debunk too with making sure there was no voice activation or anything. The Xbox just randomly turns on, like the button on the monitor has been pressed. I was sitting with my 18-year-old on my knee, and what sounded like one of his plastic toy boxes was loudly shaking. We were alone in the house. A few days ago, my partner and I were sitting in the living room around 11 a.m. with the TV off, and a loud bell sound, which we believed to be from our child's xylophone toy, happened. We tried to recreate the noise and looked around the area to see if something had fallen or if it was something else, but we cannot explain it. My partner, who is an extreme skeptic, has now started to say he thinks there's something strange going on. We have a small canvas with a photo of our son printed on it. It's above the stairs and not something we can knock on or reach. I see it every day. It was randomly wonky like it had been moved. I have just now been awake breastfeeding my little one, and the sound of the baby gate rattling has just happened. There's no breeze or draft in the house, and windows and doors are closed. Another thing is my partner recently woke up covered in scratches, red and lightly cut. He has absolutely no nails and sleeps with a t-shirt on. There were lots of scratches around 7/8. This is strange as it's one of the things that used to happen to him as a child. He has tried to recreate by scratching as hard as he can, but it doesn't look the same or work as he is a nail biter, and they are so far back they don't touch his skin. The scratches are still slightly visible over a week later. I am feeling super uneasy as we have a young child, the toys are being interfered with, and the picture has scared me. Also a few nights ago, but this could just be random baby stuff. My son was crying in the night, then sat up, stopped crying straight away, and stared into the corner. My partner thought this was weird as he's never done it before and it just seemed a bit odd. What do we do? I am considering hiring an investigator, but I'm unsure of where to begin. Based in the north of the UK. I was lured outside when I was a child. I was just 4 years old, and my parents had just moved my family into our first house. They decided to have a big family sleepover in the living room with my cousins, aunts, and uncles. I remember that night we watched Harry and the Hendersons, which was quite scary for me as a 4-year-old. After the movie, we all went to bed. I remember this night so clearly, it's possibly one of my earliest memories. A cartoon girl woke me up. Her blonde hair and pink dress are still vivid in my mind to this day. She was holding a paint bucket and a ridiculously large paintbrush. She asked me to come outside with her because she wanted to paint some things. So I followed her out the front door. No one in my family woke up or noticed. The girl led me out to my father's truck parked on the side of the house. For context, I was a very small child, and my dad's truck was tall and lifted. There is no possible way I could get in it on my own or even reach the door handle to open it. I always needed to be picked up to get in. I also rarely ever rode in it, so technically I wouldn't be familiar with how to get in it myself. Okay, well anyway, she opened the truck door and then set her paint bucket on the ground for me to stand on to get into the truck. Also yes, my dad didn't have his truck locked. We kind of live in a neighborhood out in the middle of a bunch of farmland. My dad seems to think nothing can happen out here, so he doesn't care to lock his truck. Back to the story, I don't know exactly what happened after I got in the truck, but I remember being locked in and watching the cartoon girl walk away. Once I was alone, I was absolutely petrified. I felt like I was being watched, and I remember being horrified about that damn Bigfoot Harry from the movie coming out to get me. So I did what any 4-year-old would do, and I freaked the hell out. Luckily, my dad was working in the garage that night after everyone went to bed, and I guess I was screaming and crying loud enough that he heard me from inside the garage. He ran inside the house and saw the front door wide open, still everyone asleep, bruh. So he then ran outside because, holy crap, it sounds like I was being kidnapped, but he found me inside the truck. It's still a huge mystery in my family to this day on how I was able to get in the truck. My dad checked, and there was nothing I would have been able to climb on to get inside, let alone even open the door. But it's been unexplained all these years. Ever since then I have had countless paranormal encounters, and they seem to follow me around. But hey, it's kind of a cool story to tell when I want to spook anyone. My mom sometimes talks about how she used to live in a house a few blocks from here. She's kind of religious and claims to have a gift from God that lets her know things others don't know. One night while she lived in that house, she claimed to have a dream about some kind of secret door in the basement of the house. She claimed that beyond that secret door were 2 dead kids who had been murdered in the house and hidden in there. She woke up the next morning and checked the basement. She went to the spot that she saw the door at in her dream, and sure enough, there it was. She said she didn't even know this door existed until having the dream. I asked her if she found anything, and she answered no because I didn't look. I asked why, and she said it was because she was afraid of what she would find. To this day, I don't really know how true the story is, but she seems rather confident in her statement when she says there are really dead children hidden in that house. Sometimes I ride past the house on my bike, and I just stop and stare at the house as I ponder the thought. Sometimes I even feel like knocking on the door and telling the current owner about it or leaving an anonymous letter in the mailbox. I might do that, but first I'm going to ask my mom more about it. I'm going to ask her where exactly the door was, then maybe I'll do it. I just feel as if it's the right thing to do. As a little kid, I had many experiences with spirits, some I couldn't even tell apart from people still alive, they looked so solid. Word got around, I made and lost friends this way, so it wasn't weird to be invited out on ghost hunts or even on a sleepover to look for ghosts. One girl, though, didn't tell me she invited me over for that reason. My friend had grabbed Majora's Mask from her big brother, so we were going to play. I caught on to her weird mood as we headed into the basement. She was tense and kept looking sideways at me. Me, being young and wanting to look as non-weird as possible, continued on ignoring it until I saw someone else. She was dressed in a fancy-looking pale dress with a large brimmed summer hat and long blonde hair. She also had absolutely no face at all. It was smooth like white marble, with a slight bump where her nose should be. My friend was oblivious to the girl walking towards and past us, and not wanting to freak her out, I said nothing at the time, and when I peeked back, she had simply vanished. The sleepover continued, we played some Zelda, ate junk food, then got ready for bed. My friend became awkward again as we settled in, looking around nervously before saying, "So, you did see her then? The blonde girl, with no face?" There was no point in lying, I hadn't been able to hide my reaction, she just nodded. We all see her sometimes, but no one knows why. I'd told her a few things I knew from my mom to help one feel safer and returned home, thinking it was the last I'd see of this spirit. Then I started to have dreams. I'd fall asleep, be aware I was asleep, and step from my dream world through to the faceless girl's world. It was brightly lit and filled with toys like a tin spinner and old sets of alphabet blocks, etc. She told me she was lonely, she just wanted to play, that was all she asked. So each night I went to bed, I entered her world filled with old toys. We played jump rope and with blocks, and each morning I woke so tired, like I had really stayed up all night playing games. Then one night blackness crept in from one corner of the room. I didn't even notice at first until my chest felt heavy. I looked, and the girl was staring towards the darkness. She seemed uneasy somehow and made me stand behind her. Then she aged. I don't really know how to describe it, but she just grew from this 8-year-old into a 20 to 30-something adult right before me, then held me back protectively. She said she had hoped it wouldn't come to this, that she could hide me from this darkness. She told me it was her brother, that he had followed me that same day, so she had been trying to hide me from him. She told me she would have to leave now. I remember the room becoming unstable as the darkness came closer. The last thing I recalled before waking up was her blocking the darkness with a bright light emanating from her. I stopped dreaming about her instantly and no longer woke up exhausted in the mornings or sore. Once, years later, in the middle of a dream, time seemed to slow down. I became aware I was sleeping and felt a tug, looking right. There I saw her, wedged between buildings like she didn't belong, waving with her fingers, a goodbye. Then time resumed, I was walking, and the dream continued. I never saw her again. My haunted childhood home. When I was younger, I lived in a town of less than 500. So when we first moved there, I remember loving it because it had a lot of space. The bedrooms were the size of a normal living room, and the living dining rooms were each twice the size of the bedroom. But then I went upstairs, and all of a sudden I felt really weird, like I was sick, but as soon as I went downstairs to tell my mom, I felt normal again. I thought it was weird, but I was 9, so I shrugged it off and went outside to the backyard. Now the house was really big. But the backyard was at least 7 times as large as the house. Later that day we went into the basement, which was infested with snakes. For your information, I love snakes, so I didn't mind getting them out and finding the window that they got in from. Now for a few years things went on normal. Besides me hating when I had to go upstairs, even though my bedroom was up there. About a year later, I woke up, but I couldn't move. No, there wasn't a demon in the corner or anything like that. I just could move. I could scream but I couldn't move. My 16-year-old brother, who does have autism, heard me screaming and ran in panicking. I told him I could move, so he picked me up and was bringing me to my mom and dad, who were downstairs. But as soon as we got down the stairs, I was able to move again. Later that night, when we were having dinner, I glanced upstairs, which you could see from the dining room table. I saw a shadow figure in the doorway to my room, and I screamed. My mom asked me what was wrong, and I said, "There is a man upstairs." She would end up letting me sleep in her room that night and switch their bedroom with mine and sighed, still hearing footsteps from the ceiling at night. It was fine. 4 years later, we moved, and I asked my mom about it. And she told me that she heard laughter at night and saw shadows as well. My brother doesn't remember any of it, and my dad's too damn stubborn to even acknowledge that anything was wrong with the house. I was shocked when I found out that I hadn't dreamed it. A few days ago, I was sitting with my parents in their house. Suddenly, the topic turned to paranormal things because recently, something strange has been happening to my mother. My mother began reminding my father of the time when we were walking to my grandmother's house one evening, my father, mother, sister, and me. I was the youngest then, only 6 years old. A woman dressed in white, holding a bowl in her hands, appeared in front of the four of us. We all froze in that moment. The woman, in her white dress, was floating in the air, and her legs weren't visible beneath it. She quickly turned toward the wheat field beside us, and we could see the waves in the wheat as she moved through it. My father began to follow her while we, in my mother's arms, waited to see what would happen. Beyond the wheat field was a river. My father reached the river, but the woman was nowhere to be seen. She couldn't have crossed the river, so where did she disappear? My father returned, pale, looked at my mother, and simply told us to keep walking. While my mother was telling this story, I jumped out of my chair and said that I had always thought I had dreamed it and that this dream had haunted me for years, because I still remember it as clearly as day. My mother said that it really did happen, and from that day on, she no longer looked at the world the same way. My father was as pale as he was that day, terrified by the mere thought of the event. Little house in Creston, Iowa. When I was younger, I'm talking from the ages of 0 to 6. My family and I lived in this house in Creston, Iowa. I'll never forget the place. It was 2 stories, the attic was technically 3 bedrooms, and mine was the one up the stairs. Go up the stairs through my brother's bedroom, hang a left through the parents' room, and go to the back. Picture a bedroom with slanted walls and 2 windows in the back. That was my room. A bedroom through a bedroom, to a bedroom. The layout of this place made 0 sense. It also had a basement that, from my very vague memory, never stopped flooding. Not sure what that has to do with the story, but I'd like to know what happened to this place. I remember a little road that if you followed it around the back, you'd go under this tunnel bridge that supported trains. If you look out the side window from the kitchen, you can see the public baseball fields. I'm 32 now, my brother 29. And we still have dreams about this nightmare for children. Every night when I would go to sleep, I would see these glowing eyes in my windows. 2 sets of them on occasion, like it brought its friggin' buddy to come peep on this 5-year in the 2nd story window. I would tell mom all the time. To this day, she thinks I made it up. She gave me the typical mom response and told me to stand up to my fears. I did. Once. That night I yelled, "Go away." And the body that the eyes were attached to started to frantically try to open the window. I had them locked, of course. I wouldn't go to bed without them locked. As soon as the growling and rattling started, I gunned it to my brother's room, and the little guy is floating out of his crib. I go to my mom's bed while having one of those dry can't scream moments, trying to push her awake. My father comes walking up the stairs, and my brother falls back in his crib. Dad hears him screaming and me standing there crying and reaching for him, and he puts us both back to sleep. I didn't sleep. About a week went by that I didn't sleep, and mom invited my grandparents to stay night. My grandpa was apparently the only thing that could calm me. That old geezer made me feel safe, you know. On the 3rd night of his stay, the eyes were back, so I went downstairs to snuggle up to my grandpa while he's asleep on the couch. When I rounded the corner, I could see something black floating up his stomach and up through the ceiling. He's gasping for air and begging something above his head to make it stop. I was so freaked I froze. The next morning I asked him about it. He said an angel was patting his head, telling him it was going to be okay. It's almost over. My brother was 3 and I was 5. My grandparents are all gone now. There is no way we should still be seeing this shit in our sleep by the time we're 30. I want to know if that place is still standing and if anything has happened to anyone else who stayed there. I'd just like to know that it wasn't just us. The street address is 231 Chestnut Street, Creston, Iowa. There is something in the basement. It was 2020, my boyfriend had moved out of his parents' house and into a house with some friends, and I was living with my dad. We were all discussing Christmas, and his parents said that if we wanted to spend the night Christmas Eve into Christmas morning, that was okay. His old bedroom in the basement had been converted into a guest bedroom after he moved out. A couple weeks later, my boyfriend and I were talking about it, and I told him under no circumstance would I stay the night in the basement again. We got to talking, and I realized we had both experienced similar things down there. I had 2 encounters. The first time, I had been sleeping down there after everyone had left the house. My boyfriend had left for work, and his mom left with the younger siblings for school. When I was suddenly jolted awake by the sound of someone whispering my name directly in my ear. I was jolted awake, and it was like my fight or flight instinct had gone off. It was still dark in the basement, and I was trying not to focus on that while I ran around getting my stuff together and ran upstairs. As I ran upstairs, I remember hoping that maybe his mom was home and had yelled down for me. But I got upstairs, and it was confirmed that I was alone in the house. I can't explain it, there was no one else in the house. I'm a heavy sleeper and barely even wake up to my alarm going off full volume. But this morning a quiet whisper of my name, with the feeling that someone was standing inches from my ear, jolted me awake. The second encounter was something my boyfriend and I had both experienced. I had been awake after he fell asleep, and I just couldn't shake this awful feeling that someone was watching me. I remember sitting up and looking ahead to the door of his room, which was open part way. And I remember just feeling frozen, because behind the door I could just make out a tall black figure. When I looked at it, it felt like it was looking right through me. I had never told him about these experiences, and when we finally talked to each other about it and I explained to him what had happened to me, it was like I could see the horror of realization on his face. He told me that the exact same things had happened to him. He described the tall black figure he saw down to a T compared to what I saw. Today, it freaks both of us out. When I think about that whisper in my ear, I get full body chills. Neither of us can explain it, and neither of us like to talk about it. I've never told anyone else, but I thought if there was anyone who'd understand that it'd be this place. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. This happened about 15-16 years ago. My grandmother unfortunately had reached an age and physical state that she had to go into a nursing home. She was 92 at the time, but it's still hard to see that happen. We knew she was not ever going to be able to go back to her own home again, so a few months after she entered the home, I took a week and went back to my hometown to help my mom clean out grandma's house and get it ready to sell. I had spent a lot of time with my grandma while I was growing up, and I was very comfortable at her house, so I decided to bring my 2 cats back with me and just stay at grandma's with them for the week that we were there cleaning. My cats and I settled into a bedroom right at the top of the stairs on the 2nd floor because it had the least amount of stuff in it, and the cats could just chill in there while Mom and I went through things in the rest of the house. Mom and I put in some long days going through everything in the house where Grandma had lived for about 50 years. At the end of the second long day, Mom went home, and I went up to the bedroom where I was staying. I was completely exhausted, so after petting my cats for a while, I turned off the light and quickly crashed for the night. Sometime during the middle of the night I was startled awake by a huge bang that sounded like wood slamming into wood. I thought a piece of furniture downstairs had been tipped over and hit another solid wood piece of furniture. My first thought was to get up and investigate, but right after the large bang, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, which were right next to the wall I was sleeping against. As the steps reached just outside the door to the room the cats and I were in, there was a light rap 3 times on the bedroom door. Won't lie. At this point I was terrified, but I quietly called out, "Hello? Who's there?" I thought maybe something had happened and my mom had come over to bring me some bad news or some such thing. I also had not turned on a light at all at this point. No one answered from the other side of the door. Up to this point, you could have convinced me that I dreamed the entire thing and had just woken up from a nightmare. The light switch for the room was right over my head, so I reached up and flipped on the overhead light in the room. I expected to see my cats raise their heads from different spots in the room and stare at me, wondering why I had woken up. Instead, when I turned and looked out into the room, I saw both my cats sitting shoulder to shoulder, staring big-eyed at the door, not at me at all. They clearly had heard something outside the door and didn't look like they liked what was there. This was the confirmation that I didn't really want, that I wasn't dreaming of this event. I really had heard all those noises, and now I had to figure out what to do. Of course I had plugged my phone into an outlet in a different room upstairs so that my cats, who were still fairly young and playful, wouldn't unplug it during the night. I called out to my cats, and they would turn and look at me, but then they'd look back toward the door again as if they really wanted to know what was out there but weren't going to get too close to investigate. They were also clearly comforted by pressing against each other shoulder to shoulder for safety. Mustering all the courage I could find, I swung my legs out of the bed and stood up. I couldn't just stay in this room terrified. I took the few steps to the door and called out one more time, "Is anyone there?" Silence. With a shaky hand I grabbed the doorknob and turned it. Empty space has never been more scary to me than when I opened that door because my brain thought someone should be there. I'd heard them come up the stairs and tap on the door. Why was no one there? Very cautiously, I searched the entire 4-bedroom house. Everything was exactly as my mom and I had left it. The doors were locked to the outside, and nothing was tipped over to explain the loud bang I had heard. After the search, I went back to the bedroom with the cats and went back to sleep. Anyone I've told this story to in person asked me how I could do that, and my only answer is that I think I was on an adrenaline rush and then I just crashed. Nothing else happened that night. The next morning, my mom came over to have breakfast and start another day of going through Grandma's things. I told her all about the night and expected her to tell me I was imagining things. Instead she said, "When we go visit your grandma today, you need to tell her this story." I said, "Why?" "So she can laugh at me." Mom said, "No, just tell her what you told me." Now I was really intrigued. That afternoon, Mom and I went to the nursing home to visit Grandma. We chatted for a while just about stuff, and then Mom said, "Oh, Mom. Robert has a story for you from last night." Mom's tone had changed when she said this, so Grandma looked at me with kind of raised eyebrows. I started the story and very soon into it as I said, "I woke up to this very loud sound of." My grandma cut me off and said, "Wood slamming into wood?" I'm pretty sure my jaw dropped, but it dropped even further when she asked the next question, "Did you see him?" I stared at my grandmother and said, "Did I see who?" "The old guy in the overalls," was her response. I looked over at my mom, and she had a grin like the Cheshire Cat. At this point, they informed me that my grandma had several experiences with full-body apparitions in her house, and she heard footsteps and such on an even more frequent schedule. One time she followed the apparition toward the bathroom door and asked him where he was going. He said, "To fix the car." Grandma says she told him there was no car in the bathroom, but he went in there anyway and just disappeared. Grandma just never told many people about these events because she didn't want them to think she was crazy. Then a few days later, when more family showed up to help finish cleaning and organizing Grandma's house, I shared the story with my mom's brothers, and my mom and her brothers started talking about the shadow figures they saw upstairs at this house while they were growing up. My younger uncle even went on to say that was why he slept on the couch so often until he got to move out of the house because the shadow figures freaked him out so much. I stayed in this house as a child almost every weekend and never had any paranormal experiences then. I guess the spirits waited until I was an adult to introduce themselves to me. Part of me wonders if they wanted to know who I was when I was staying there cleaning because Grandma had been out of the house for a few months at that time. The house has been sold, but it's still there. I'd love to chat with the people living there now and find out if they have any stories. The mimic is in my house. 2 years ago, me and my family moved across states and into my current home. Usually, a large number of people gather in our house, with my family spending most of their time outside on the porch. Some family was supposed to be flying back to the state we moved from that day. I was getting home from school last year and was walking through the door. My mom was walking past into her room, and I called out to her. She didn't answer me, so I just brushed it off because she has pretty selective hearing. My dad was outside smoking, so I went outside and gave him a kiss and a hug to let him know I got home. I sat down and told him I saw my mother walking into her room and joked that she ignored me. My dad gave me a confused look and told me she was at the airport dropping people off. I thought he was joking with me and laughed, saying she probably forgot something and was just getting it. I pulled up my phone to look at her location too, like, I'd proof she was here, and it said she was 45 minutes away at the airport. My dad looked at me weird and said, "I told you so." But the thing with my mom is that she's kind of short. My sisters and I are all a couple inches taller than her. She also dyes her hair an orange color. One of my sisters has black hair, and the other one is like a dirty blonde. No one really looks like her. What's really the kicker in this story is that a week ago or something we were talking about out like ghost experiences in like a group of me, my dad, and my mom. I retold my story, and my dad got this look on his face. He does that face when he doesn't want to say something scary. I pressed him on it, and it turns out something similar happened to him. My dad is from Morocco, and his mom visits from time to time in the States. One time, when she was supposed to be in Morocco, he saw her walking up the steps to go upstairs. He was home alone, like me and my sisters were at school/work, and my mom was at my aunt's house. He chills on the couch a lot, and from sitting where he usually does, you can see the top portion of the stairs in our house. He, being the man he is, walked up the steps after he saw that she disappeared upstairs. He gets upstairs and sees her walk into the room that she would use when she lives with us. My dad walked into the room, and obviously no one was in there. So apparently we have an entity that likes mimicking mothers. Oh, and I saw my mother completely solid. It looked like my mother, even down to wearing what she wore that morning. I'm 26 now and haven't experienced anything out of the ordinary, but remembered having some events when I used to live with my parents. Just wanted to give some background about me. I have 4 siblings, 3 girls and 1 boy, so I shared a room with one of my sisters. I have told my paranormal experiences before with my siblings, but only my sister that I share a room with has experienced similar things. I believe I was around 10 when it happened. I was working on a school project in my room. Just sitting on my bed and cutting out paper for my poster board when suddenly I hear 3 loud knocks in my closet. My closet was closed, so my first initial thought was that one of my siblings was playing a prank on me. I went to open my closet to see that no one was in there. All of my clothes were hanging so I could see if there was anyone hiding in there at the bottom. Another time was when I would wake up in the middle of the night, trying to go back to sleep, when all of a sudden I would feel something crawl underneath my pillow. It felt like someone's hand was under my pillow, slowly moving down towards my back. I was too scared to move and would feel it happening, and then it would stop. Again, nothing was underneath my pillow after checking. The craziest part is that the same thing happened with my sister after I told her about it. We have been experiencing similar things. Things like our parents or siblings calling our name from downstairs but they weren't at home. Or the window blinds would slowly move on their own, shaking, but our window would be closed. I had another crazy thing that happened, but to be honest, I feel like my mind is playing tricks with me. I've always dismissed the fact that it's not paranormal, but why would my sister also experience the same thing? These events occurred between 2006 and 2008 in a small town in Kentucky. I had flirted with the idea of the paranormal for many years, and generally, I believed that spirits could haunt a place or people. Things started around the time that I was 14, my mom and I moved into a new house we had rented with her then fiancé. It was small but cozy, and my mom could turn any space into a home. I had hoped this was our time to be happy, as cliché as that sounds. About a month in, the voices began. Echoed and far away, they were most definitely coming from inside the house. Thinking it was my mom and her fiancé talking, I peeked out my door. Complete darkness and silence. Everyone was sleeping, snoring even. I thought, okay, maybe I was just mistaken. And went back to bed, not really giving it any more thought. A few more weeks pass by, and I hear more voices and eventually, what sounds like a dragging sound, but since I'm half awake for this, I mostly brush it off. This is also around the time when my mom's fiancé would have spells. Since we moved in, he was generally gloomier than before, like he was angry all the time. It seemed to get better when he got out of the house, but after a year or so, it didn't end then either. When summer break from school started, I was home alone a lot while my mom and fiancé were at work. Plates and cups started falling off the shelves in the kitchen. They were plastic, so no damage was done, but they couldn't possibly have fallen on their own, not when they were sitting at least 2 inches from the edge. I decided I had to approach my mom about what I had been hearing and seeing happen. I was sure she wouldn't believe me, and she didn't. There's no such thing as ghosts. Having an interest in what was going on in our house, when my mom's fiancé asked if there were any movies I'd like him to burn for me, in one of his better moods, I had him get White Noise for me. My mom and I watched the movie together, and she could definitely see how I could believe it. Minor things like that continued to happen for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then my mom came to me to ask if I had said her name last night. I replied, of course not, I was asleep. She thought it was weird but didn't put much into it. That is, until it started happening almost every other night, until one night, whatever was whispering her name while she slept, blew in her face. She said that she could feel the air, it blew her hair back, that scared her awake and into believing me when I said something was there. We wanted to watch White Noise again because we liked the movie and these things were still happening, but when I pulled out my DVD, it was blank. You could see from the back of the disc that it had never been burned, despite this being the copy we had watched weeks before. Extremely creeped out, we put the DVD away and didn't discuss it much. Sometime after that, with minor occurrences and voices, her fiancé and I decided to go shopping out of town. When we came back, my mom was sitting on the bed, and a candlestick was in the middle of the floor. I asked, "What's that doing there?" And she replied, "Something wanted it there, so I decided to leave it, She said that the candlestick had flew off the wall, stopped, and dropped to the ground 3 feet from her spot on the bed. She had no doubt that there was something she had no explanation for there. My next major occurrence was one night in my sleep. I dreamed that my mom's fiancé was fighting someone in my mom's bedroom. I had no idea who he was fighting, and when he knocked the man to the ground, I looked down. He had become a living corpse, with legs ripped off and one arm. He grabbed my leg in the dream, and I woke up. I checked my leg where he had grabbed me, and there was a black handprint. I tried to wipe it off, and it came off on my hands like soot or some kind of dirt. This was too much for my half-awake mind, and I fell back asleep. When I woke up, all of the dirt was gone. A few more months passed and my mom had enough of her failing relationship. They hadn't really been a couple for nearly a year when we left. It's my belief that the spirits in the home affected them both and me and led to the demise of their relationship. Once we moved out, there was no more activity. None. My white noise DVD was burned again and worked like it should. I have a theory about who at least some of the spirits could have been. I don't think it was just one. One theory is that it could have been a woman who committed suicide across the road from our house about 20 years prior. The woman had been in an affair and, unable to live with the guilt, shot herself, leaving her 2 daughters behind. My mom had known this girl in high school and still knew her when she took her life. I grew up hearing this story, so I knew it well. In high school, I became friends with her daughter because we had the same circle of friends. It was a year or so before I connected the dots between that story and my friend. Simultaneously, my grandfather had worked with her grandmother, so that's 3 generations of this family that have been friends and knew about the incident. I think perhaps because of her tragic passing and the pain she felt, her spirit stayed, and because we all knew about her and knew her family, she may have reached out to us. If someone knew what you did and why you did it, wouldn't you try to let them know you were there? Another theory is that one of them was an aunt I had that my mom and I were very close to. She passed away in her early 50s due to cancer, and the entire family took her death pretty hard. Everyone tells my mom how she reminds them of my aunt, so perhaps that connection could have attracted her spirit. This concludes the story. Everything here happened as I described, and while we couldn't explain it, the home made firm believers of both myself and my mom that the paranormal exists, at least in the spiritual sense. We tell our story to family and friends when the subject comes up. We haven't had anyone say they don't believe us, but there are those that remain skeptical, and chances are, they always will. I saw a ghost years ago when I was about 8 years old. When I was younger, I had experienced paranormal style phenomena more so than I do now. I actually prayed to God to take the gift away because it sort of freaked me out a little. It was Thanksgiving, and I was coming back from the bathroom and looked left into a bedroom that was basically being used as a storage room. This was the first time when I encountered a ghost or spirit that it was in perfect form to the last detail. Older guy wearing thick glasses with a plaid shirt and denim overalls. The strange thing was we both froze when we saw each other. Almost like I was a ghost to him and vice versa. I immediately told my family after the ghost ran away and faded as he did so. Literally turned around and ran into nothingness. It has the same color as you would think when someone said Casper the Friendly Ghost, but the details were so vivid it was like you could even see buttons and hair and everything perfectly. Other times I usually just feel the presence or get a sort of white mist with other experiences with no actual detail visually. I do believe in God and the afterlife, but I was wondering if anyone thinks ghosts are just timeline blips where maybe he saw me as a ghost and I encountered him. If you stayed to the end, a little bonus is that when I described the figure to my aunt, she said it was an exact description of her great-grandfather-in-law who used to live there. So I know it was a legit person that could have been in the house, ghost or timeline glitch to whatever. Curious what others know, especially if you have background in the supernatural. I wasn't a believer until this happened to me. I wasn't a paranormal believer at all, and then something happened to me that caused me to move from my flat. It was 2013, and I just rented a granny flat. It was behind the main home, new and affordable for that time. The flat was fully closed off from the street. I had to use the garage key and then close it to then walk down to my front door, which had a locked screen door in front of the locked front door. Unless you rang me, there was no way of getting to my door. The main house was unoccupied and locked at all times unless the landlord was coming to get something or fix something I needed fixed. A couple of months in, I came home exhausted from work, locked the garage and my screen door, and soon went to bed. In the middle of the night, I awoke to loud scratching sounds going from the top to the bottom of the door. Not only that, there was a loud heaving breath unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It didn't sound like a dog or a cat or a person, it sounded savage and like it was out of breath. The inhale and exhale were deep and made loud grunting noises. I was petrified and sat shaking in the corner of the bedroom. How did it get past the garage and my screen door? After an hour, I had enough and screamed F off. It stopped, and after 15 minutes, it started again. At this point, sleep was useless, so I started recording the sound on my phone, which I did twice successfully. It was almost sunrise, and I thought this was the end. I gave up, and next thing I know, I wake up in the morning in front of the door in total silence. I carefully opened the door, and there was nothing there. I got ready for work and listened back to the recordings I made. Honestly, I don't know what a demon sounds like, but to me it sounded like one. After work, I rush over to my sister's house so she can hear the sounds. She looked at me funny and said, "What sound?" "I can't hear anything." I heard it back, but the sound was gone. No one believed me. I moved out that day. The mute and the basement monster. Swear to God this is true. When I was like 7 or 8, my mother ran an in-home daycare that went pretty late for certain clients. When the baby was sleeping at night or in the late evening, myself and one other child, Maddie, weren't allowed upstairs at all. We had to stay in my parents' basement bedroom, where we wouldn't wake the baby. Also, my mom was pretty mean, so I really hated to bother her ever. Maddie was younger than I was, probably 3 or 4 at the oldest, and I suspect she was somewhat disabled. She wasn't exactly mute, but she maybe spoke 5 whole words to me in the couple of years that I knew her, one of which is the subject of this story. She had strawberry blonde hair and a lazy eye. Really cute kid. One night we were watching TV on the bed in the basement. It was winter in Iowa and snowing really hard, so it was dark as midnight outside, not that it would matter much in the basement. I honestly have no idea what time it was. So we're watching TV together, in and out of sleep, and Maddie suddenly pulls on my sleeves urgently. I scoot a little closer, and she points to the slightly ajar door to the stairs, whispering "monster." I look through the gap in the half-open doorway, and I don't see anything. I figure the villains in the cartoon are giving her ideas, so I draw her up closer, remind her there's no such thing as monsters, and we go back to watching TV. We're watching for a few more minutes when I notice she is literally quivering next to me, like shaking. She's so scared. I ask her what's wrong again, and she whispers again, eyes fixed on the doorway, "Monster." This time, when I trace her gaze, I see a dark shape move across the doorway in the darkness. It was almost as tall as I was, but its gait wasn't. Quite human. Instantly I was cold and covered in goosebumps. The stairs are through that door, so we couldn't really escape, but I was just as terrified of shouting for my mom. I decided that, because I was a little older, it was my job to protect Maddie. So I told her to wait in the bed while I went to check it out. I was sweating so hard as I left that room. I didn't see anything under the stairs, so I took a turn into the unfinished storage room, which was even darker than the rest of the basement. Easily one of the top 3 most scared I've ever been in my life, especially because the light switch was in the middle of the storage room. I had to walk through quite a bit of darkness before I could reach it. I moved painfully slowly toward that switch when I saw something move out the corner of my eye, then hide behind my dad's motorcycle. I couldn't stand it anymore. I dived around the motorcycle as fast as I could and hit the light and found my ducking dog. He was what's called a Quichond. You can online search it and try to imagine it walking by in the dark. I never even considered that the monster could have been my dog because the dog was 5+ years old and had never come into the basement before. It wasn't like he wasn't allowed, he just wasn't interested, and this was the first time. I was living with my mother's ex-husband because he was my father figure when I was younger. I didn't know I was home alone until after everything, and we were in an old house. I was upstairs in my bed just resting and wanting to take a nap. But it was one of those days where you want to sleep but you have so much energy at the same time, so you just are thinking. Okay, so I was laying there and I heard the basement door open, someone walking down the hallway, again, old house, can hear every movement, and I was in silence and my bedroom door was open. They walked down the hallway and to the stairs that lead to all the bedrooms. I thought it was my stepdad at the time just going to his room to get ready. I heard every step, and it was a slow and steady walk. Then I heard the shuffling of the feet on the carpet. I was facing a wall, and the feet walked into my room and went right behind me. For some reason I didn't feel like talking, so I pretended I was sleeping because I thought it was stepdad, and I didn't want to talk, I wanted to nap. So I closed my eyes and just pretended to be asleep. After what I would say 30 seconds, I heard the feet turn around and walk back downstairs and down the hall and close the basement door. Immediately after that, the garage door opened, and I heard my stepdad, his girlfriend, and her kids walk in the house. I was home alone the entire time. I lost my absolute shit, but they don't believe in things like that, so I was looking crazy. Is my house haunted by a demonic entity? I have reason to believe my house is haunted by a demonic entity. For a little background, my house used to be a funeral home in the early 1900s. I've lived here my whole life with my dad and siblings, and every one of us has had encounters with spirits, mostly harmless, but the house is absolutely haunted without a doubt. So if you came to say spirits are fantasies, believe what you want, but please don't bother typing your opinion here. Anyway, I have the house to myself now. It's just me and my 2 cats that live here. My stepmother came to bless the house a few weeks ago, and she reported that she thinks it only stirred something up. She mentioned feeling lightheaded and drained, like she was going to pass out. Even when I entered, I've only felt dread, and it feels as though I'm constantly being watched. There are always footsteps upstairs, not my cats, as I have the stairs blocked off by a gate, and growls coming from the basement, also not my cats. The basement door is always closed and locked. However, I can usually ignore these sounds, and I tend not to get scared anymore. Until last night, that is. I had just gotten home from my girlfriend's and settled into bed when I felt the air around me go cold. I felt frozen, and the energy was overwhelming. I couldn't help but be afraid. Instantly, I began to play some worship music in hopes it would make me feel lighter. Apparently it was the wrong move. The energy around me grew sharp, and I could tell I had made it angry. My ears began ringing violently, and I was hit with a wave of nausea and dizziness. I genuinely believed I was going to pass out. It took all the strength I had to even speak and tell the energy to leave. After that, it seemed to subside, but I could still feel a lingering sense of dread. While I've dealt with these spirits my whole life, I've never felt anything like that. Even now, I feel cold and as though something is watching me write this. Not to mention how I've had a mysterious respiratory illness and chronic depression/fatigue since I started living alone about 3 to 4 weeks ago, which refuses to go away. Can anyone tell me if these are signs of a demonic haunting? And if so, is there anything I can do about it? Moving is not an option at the moment. Also, I'd like to note that I know this reads like a fictional story. I wish that was the case, but it is something I am genuinely dealing with, and I'm just desperate for help at this point. My grandma, Yaya, and grandfather, Papu, bought a ranch home in the suburbs after moving from downtown Detroit in 1969. They were the second owners of the house, and it was built in the 1930s. My Papu passed away in 1981 in the home. My mother has 4 older siblings who had all moved out by that time. She stayed living with my Yaya until she married my dad in 1986. Nothing weird ever happened that she can recall from her childhood. My grandparents were Greek immigrants. They were devoted to orthodoxy, and there were at least 5 crosses and icons in every single room of the house. So it always felt like I was in church when I was there. The first time I recall any odd goings-on was in the early 2000s. My Yaya was in her early 80s at the time and told my mother and I one day, "Don't tell anyone, but at night before I go to bed there are people in my bedroom that watch me." Immediately, my mom was concerned that this was a sign of dementia or Alzheimer's. Thankfully, it was not. We attributed it to her glaucoma. In hindsight, that makes no sense, or that she was in a dreamlike state but not yet asleep. Didn't hear much about anything odd after that. In 2012, my parents separated, and my 3 siblings and mother moved in with my Yaya. My sister and I had our own rooms on the first floor, and my mother and brother stayed in the basement. Odd things started to happen. The motion sensor light at the bottom of the basement steps used to go on and off by itself in the middle of the night, according to my brother. The hallway linen closet would be open in the morning even though it was shut previously. Some banging in my Yaya's closet. All a bit weird, but nothing too crazy. One night I had a few friends over, and we were drinking in the basement when my mom was out and my brother was at my dad's. All of a sudden we heard a loud crash from a downstairs closet, and when I opened it, the metal pole, which had 3 light jackets hanging on it, was split down the middle. It was odd because there was nothing in the closet itself that would have fallen to make that sort of banging sound. I let it go and didn't think much of it. In March of 2015, my Yaya sadly passed away at the age of 95. She passed in her bedroom. We knew she was going to go soon, and before we went to bed, my siblings, mom, and I prayed over her. At about 2 a.m., I woke up out of sleep to someone saying, "My name, get up," and when I went into her room, she was gone. Maybe it was a dream? I don't know, but thinking about it freaks me out. After her death, things went haywire. One night, my sister and I were watching television in the living room, and it was probably 10:30 p.m. I went to the kitchen to get something to eat. The light from the TV was bright enough that I could easily find my way to the kitchen. I looked at the back door because I felt odd. That's really the only way I could describe it. The back door had a peephole, and the light in the backyard was automatically set to turn off at 11 p.m. normally. You could see the light shining through the peephole, but I didn't. As I adjusted my eyes, I saw a large black shadow standing at the landing in front of the back door. I froze, turned my head, and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, it was gone. Needless to say, after that I felt extremely uncomfortable in the home. Prior to this, I never had any real paranormal experience. I was on the phone with my mom and simultaneously pulling into the driveway of the house. We were finishing up our conversation when I looked at the front door. It was the kind of screen door that had a white bottom and then a window that would begin at about the waist of a 6-foot adult. What I saw was my mom kneeling in front of the door, so I only saw her eyes and her curly black hair peeking over the bottom of the window. As I was still on the phone with her, I said, "Mom, what are you doing? Stand up," and she told me that she wasn't home and would be there in a few minutes. Again, I froze, shut my eyes, and when I opened them, the eyes and curly black hair were gone. I told her I wasn't going into the house until she came home, and she didn't ask why. When she pulled in, I told her what she saw, and she said, "Honey, I was hoping none of you would see her." She went on to explain that since Yaya passed, a small girl with black curly hair and a red dress often appeared in her bedroom downstairs. She gave one specific example. She was watching TV on her laptop late at night, looked up, and saw her standing in the middle of the room with a big smile on her face. All my mom said was hello, looked back at the TV, and then she was gone. I guess this was their typical interaction. Things like the cellar door would be open, I would latch it, come back down to retrieve my laundry, and it would be open again. The banging on the closet doors got worse. The microwave door and oven drawer would be left open. If we called my mom's phone, it would often sound like static gurgling if she was in the house. The worst of it happened one night, about 2 weeks before we were to move out of the house. We sold it roughly 5 months after my Yaya died. My siblings, mother, and I were sitting in the dining room laughing and having a couple drinks. Without saying a word to each other, we all went silent. The air in the room got heavy, and it felt like the oxygen was sucked out of it. All of a sudden we heard an ungodly wailing from the basement. The only way I can describe it is a mountain lion yelling. This was followed by screaming up and down the stairs. I hid under the table with my ears covered, my sister sat still, and my little brother cried. And my mom, the absolute badass she is, ran down the stairs and screamed, "In the name of Jesus Christ, get the duck out of my house." We were all absolutely freaking terrified. Beyond terrified. That night we all slept in my room together. My mom and brother slept in the living room until we moved out. Nothing too crazy happened after that night in the 2 remaining weeks we lived there. It's been 8 years since, and we occasionally talk about it. My mom's siblings don't believe it because they never had any strange goings on in the time they lived there. I sometimes wonder if the new residents have had anything happen. They haven't sold the house yet, at least. Since then, my family has not experienced any type of paranormal goings on. But goddamn, I do not want to live in a haunted house again. Something tried to enter my room one night. I, 16F, and my brother, 19M, were home alone one night, messing around and playing video games until around 4 a.m. After calling it a night, I went into my room, which is connected to his room by a shared bathroom, and I suddenly got an intense feeling that I should lock my door. I never lock my door, ever, but for some reason something inside me was screaming too. I faintly heard a man making a shh noise, and my dog was growling slightly, but he didn't bark, which was weird because he always freaks out whenever someone comes into the living room, even my brother. Then my doorknob starts rattling violently. Not your typical trying to open a door rattle, it was crazy, like the door handle was tweaking on meth or something. I thought it was my brother playing some stupid trick, but I ran straight to his room through the bathroom in a matter of 2 seconds, and he was still sitting there, headphones on, and playing video games. He couldn't possibly have made it back in time. I started shouting hysterically about how it wasn't funny, and he was dead confused. Armed with a flashlight and a Batman action figure, we went back to my room. The doorknob was still high and tweaking on crystal meth. My brother reached out and touched the door and felt a shock, and just like that, the rattling stopped. I slept with my door locked the next couple nights, and it happened another 2 or 3 times, and then it just stopped. My brother, on the other hand, thought he became a ghostbuster. Any explanation/debunks? This past Friday, I was talking to an old friend about some of the stories and things that I've personally experienced. We somehow got to the topic of haunted homes and things we had encountered, and she made me remember some stories that I don't really talk about often. When I was younger, my family and I lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in a suburb of Dallas. I shared a room with my 2 brothers, and for the most part, it wasn't really all that bad. My parents started going to church with our neighbors, and things were actually going pretty well. We weren't ever really the religious type, but somehow, this church felt different, and I myself really liked to attend. I even became a Sunday school teacher for first graders, and I really enjoyed it. It made me feel at peace, and my family just seemed to be happier around that time. The reason I bring this up is because some believe that this somehow plays a part in some of the incidents that happened while we lived in that apartment. One Sunday, I woke up, and I just wasn't feeling well. I remember getting into a little argument with my younger brother because he thought I was playing hooky. He didn't want to be alone at church with my parents, but I honestly felt like shit. I had made up my mind. My older brother and I stayed home, and my parents pretty much dragged my little brother along with them. I remember that it was a pretty quiet day, and I was just lying around watching my brother play video games. Our room was set up to where the back of the TV faced the doorway, so if you were watching TV, you could still see out into the hallway. As I was watching him play, I noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye. I didn't really think anything of it at first because I was actually really into whatever game he was playing, but after a while, I was forced to pay attention. I remember this so vividly because it was the first time in my life that I actually saw something that others couldn't see. As I looked up, I saw the figure of a man peeking into the room. I could only see half of him as the other half was hiding, but I remember what he looked like. He had spiked up, messy hair, jagged teeth, and his eyes were a really light color. I distinctly remember that we met eyes, and he smiled at me, revealing these jagged, sharp-looking teeth. Then I realized that I could see the bathroom, which would have been impossible because his body would have blocked the view. He was transparent. The weird thing is that he actually had a slight color to him even though he was see-through. It was a peachy kind of color, but I could still see everything through him. The whole time between me seeing him, us meeting eyes, and him smiling probably lasted a few seconds, but I remember it so well. I immediately buried my face in a pillow, and I whispered to my brother, "Someone's here." He probably looked at me really confused because he paused his game, and all I could do was repeat myself with my face still shoved against the pillow. He quickly got up and retrieved a knife he always kept under his bed. He cautiously walked out into the hallway, and I followed. I was terrified, and I didn't want to be left alone. Honestly, my immediate thought wasn't, "Oh, I just saw a ghost." I legitimately thought that someone had managed to somehow break into our apartment while we weren't paying attention. We looked in the other bedroom across the hall, then in the bathroom, and then finally walked into the kitchen and living room to check the front door. Everything was locked, even the chain lock. He looked kind of pissed. "What exactly did you see?" "There's nobody here," he asked me. "Dude, I swear, there was a guy peeking at us from the doorway." He basically called bullshit and left it at that, but I know what I saw. Once the initial scare had gone away, I knew that what I saw wasn't human. I didn't tell my parents, and I made sure not to tell my younger brother so I wouldn't scare him. Flash forward a few years. We moved into a house in another city about 10 miles away. My brothers and I started talking about spooky stuff, trying to scare each other in the new house. Since my younger brother was now in middle school, I decided it was time to finally tell him the story. I didn't describe the apparition in detail, I basically just said that I had seen a guy at the apartment. His facial expressions changed, and he tilted his head and asked, "Did he have spiky hair?" I remember I felt my heart drop, and the mood immediately changed. Yeah," I said. I looked at him waiting for a reply, and I'll never forget how casually he answered, "I've seen him too." We lived in those apartments for a number of years, and we had a few things happen there. Remember I mentioned church and all that? Well, the reason why I think that's relevant is due to the following incidents. Every summer, my brothers and I would stay up as late as possible playing flash games, looking for ghost videos, and chatting with friends online. We would wait until our parents would go to bed and then immediately turn on our computers and begin our nightly ritual. One night, my mom had fallen asleep in the living room reading the Bible. Because it's late. I've been seeing shadows in the kitchen. I fell asleep, and I heard whispering, and I thought you guys were standing in the dark, but there's nobody there. I'm just saying, your grandma always said the spirits came out around this time. My brothers and I looked at each other with excitement at the thought of having our very own ghost investigation. Just then, we heard what sounded like a spoon falling into the sink. We all kind of jumped, and my mom took the opportunity to add the extra creep factor by jokingly saying, "Maybe it's the devil." As soon as she said that, I kid you not, we heard the loudest sound come from the kitchen. It sounded like a few pots and pans had made their way out of their storage and had hit the ground full force. It startled all of us. Our faces immediately changed, and my mom legitimately looked scared. We all went out to the kitchen, and not a single dish was out of place. It was freaky. Aside from that incident, there were times that my mom would go to work and leave my older brother and I in charge of tidying up the house. I didn't like going into her room alone because she had a wind-up music box, and it freaked me out. My dad had given it to her for her birthday. It played Happy Birthday and a little doll held a basket or something that said her birth month on it, and he just happened to find it at a thrift store. That doll had a habit of playing on her own. Sometimes I would be in her room and literally nobody ever touched that doll, and somehow it still managed to play the creepiest rendition of what's supposed to be a happy song. I also often heard breathing behind me, and every time I would turn around, it would stop. My mom also had the TV turn on by itself a few times, but we chalked it up to a malfunction. Regardless, after all of these things, I stopped going in there by myself. I don't know what to attribute those incidents to. My mother seemed to think that it somehow had something to do with our newfound faith. She had brought up a few of the weird things that happened to our neighbor, and they were quick to say that whenever the devil feels as though it's losing someone to the good side, he will send demons to disturb the peace out of anger. I don't really know how true that all is. Like I said, we aren't the religious type, or at least not anymore. I do know those apartments had a few deaths occur on the property, but not in our specific unit. We sometimes think it could have been the furniture that my mom bought at thrift stores and antique places. It's often said that spirits can sometimes become attached to things they loved in their lifetime. All I know is that some of that furniture continued to be at the center of strange happenings even after we moved from that apartment. There's something in my aunt's house. When I was younger, I used to go there all the time. My cousins, who lived in London, would also come up to visit from time to time. Well, one time I was sick, so I didn't go. When my mom got back, she started telling a story to my dad about what happened. She was trying to keep quiet about it, likely wanting to not frighten me. But I overheard regardless. What she said sent shivers down my spine. My older cousin stood in the living room, with my mom and auntie opposite her. They were just talking until my cousin said something terrifying, like straight out of a horror movie. "Who's that little girl standing next to you?" she said to my auntie. There was nobody else there. But that's not the only time something like that happened. One time, I was just sitting on their stairs while my mom was chatting with my aunt in the kitchen. To get from the kitchen to the living room, you had to walk past the stairs. So my mother went into the living room for some reason, and what happened here scared me so much I couldn't sleep. When she walked past, she saw a figure move across the top of the stairs. It was only me, my mom, and my aunt in the house. I knew this because she looked up there and gasped, then she went to ask my aunt if anyone else was here. Years later, I asked my mom about it. She said she remembers it, and she was so scared inside but tried to hide it. Another instance, the last one, was when me and my brother had to sleep over at their house because my parents were away. Neither of us could sleep all night, so we resorted to talking. We talked about so many things together, and we were both having fun. My uncle and aunt were in bed in the house, but on the complete opposite side of the house. We heard a shh, which we both assumed was my uncle, even though it seemed really loud and close to us. I was thinking about it recently, and I can't really shake the fact that something is off. The shh was really loud, and it sounded like it came from a lot closer than his room. Now I just can't stop thinking about something. What if it wasn't him that night? If I haven't told these stories very well, I'm sorry. But all of this is completely true. The girl and the piano. This story takes place at my neighbor's house when I was a young teenager. In 2010, my family and I moved into our house that our cousin used to own. We live at the end of a dirt road, and all our neighbors are family. Right up the road is my other cousin who was my age, so we were good friends, so we used to hang out all the time, and I have many horror stories with her and with things I've experienced on my own. The neighbor's house I'll be referring to in this story is our closest neighbor, and they are also our cousins. So whenever I walk to my cousin's house, whose name I'll refer to as L, I'd have to pass by my neighbors to go see L. One night I was walking home from L's house, and as I got to my neighbor's house, I stopped dead in my tracks. They have a set of glass doors right out front of their house, but they always had the blinds down, they were never raised. But this time, the blinds were raised and the lights on, but this was late at night and no other lights in the house were on. The people who live there are my grandma's cousin and her youngest son, who is about 15 years older than me. But what I saw scared me so intensely I couldn't move. I saw a young girl with long black hair and a white gown, her back to me as she played the piano. I had never seen her before, and no new cars were in their yard. After standing there outside watching this girl play the piano, the song playing loudly enough to hear outside, my heart was racing, and then I quickly ran the rest of the way home, which wasn't very far. The second I got home, I texted Elle and told her what I saw, and within minutes we agreed to meet right outside my neighbor's house so she could see the scary sight. It just took a few minutes for both of us to make it to my neighbors, and by the time we did, there was no song, no lights, and the blinds were once again pulled all the way down. My cousin and I were even more freaked out, and after some talking, we went home. The next day we asked our family if they had seen the girl come or knew who she was, and they said there was one girl who fit the description. But she was dead, and she died locked up in a mental institution before we were even born. I wasn't as close to my neighbors as I am now, so years went by with that mystery. Only recently, as an adult, did I ask them about that night, and they never had a girl there like that ever, and not only that, the piano hasn't worked in years. They felt just as freaked out as I was when I told them what I saw because they never had a girl over, and to this day I have never seen her again, but the memory of that time will never go away. I have many more stories to tell because I have a gift of seeing demons and going through things most others don't. My great-grandma also could see things, and those stories I will tell as well. But this is the first story I wanted to introduce first. What seemed like an innocent sight of a young girl playing the piano was really something unseemly. After playing her song, she vanished and wasn't seen again, at least not by me. There is something else living in my house. This started around 5 years ago, shortly after my youngest turned 1. I have always been sensitive, but this has started to frighten me. One night I was getting ready to put my youngest to bed. He had fallen asleep on the couch. We kept all the bedroom doors closed at the time, as he was walking and had already brained himself on the door multiple times trying to close it. I had picked him up and asked my middle, 3-year-old at the time, to please open the door for me. As I waited for him to come into the hall, I watched as the bedroom door clicked open and swung into the room. I had frozen in shock and only snapped out of it when my middle had asked why I asked him to open the door that was already open. I had shrugged the question off at the time, telling him I was sorry I forgot I had already opened it. No door in my house just swings open, it stays exactly where you leave it. When I told my husband, he brushed it off, saying I must have imagined it or there was a breeze that pushed it open. The next day I tested it, wanting to be sure of what I saw. I left it cracked and carried my youngest back into the same area, and the door didn't move. I opened the windows, and the door still didn't move. Over the last 5 years I have seen and heard many things happening in my house. I would be happy to share those stories as well. As no one else sees or hears it, they brush me off and tell me I'm imagining things, which is until this last week. I had given up trying to explain what I was seeing and hearing to my family, as they didn't believe me. I had gone to take a shower, and my husband was watching a movie and eating ice cream with the kids. The lights were off because you can't have movie night in a lit room. When my daughter came back from putting her bowl in the kitchen, she sat down next to her dad. As soon as she pulled her feet onto the couch, the lamp in the corner of the room turned on. My husband, being the skeptical man he is, thought it was my middle child. He asks if he was back behind the couch, and seconds later he walks into the room from the kitchen. Now this is a crank lamp, you have to really turn the dial for it to light up. I had turned it off before getting in the shower, as I knew they would start the movie without me. When I left the bathroom, my husband looked at me and said, "I think you were right about the ghost." He pulled up the security camera footage, and you can clearly see the light turning on. You can hear him ask for my middle child and see him enter the room a few seconds later. Now I feel smug that I'll no longer be called crazy, but the activity has picked up quite a bit in this last year and has started to make me uneasy. Especially since my youngest has started seeing the same figure I see in his bedroom. Black mold and things in the hallway. Here are another few experiences I had as a child, both were around the age of 4 to 5 years old. First, my mom had this boyfriend, and she's visited him every so often at his apartment. And me being as young as I was, I'd typically have to be brought along wherever she went. I remember they listened to a lot of music together and danced in his living room, while I'd be typically occupying myself with toys on the stairs or something. Anyway, one night, we were all in her boyfriend's bedroom trying to sleep. I remember I couldn't sleep. I was just looking all around the room, letting my child's mind wander. I then, for reasons I can't really describe, became fixated on a corner of the room. A spot where the wall meets the ceiling. That corner. I'm not sure how long I'd been staring at it, but it felt like hours. After a while of just lying there, looking at the corner, I notice a black, cloudy substance starts to slowly manifest in the corner. It startled me. But I just kept looking, remaining silent. It slowly started to grow. At this point, I start to shake my mother's shoulder, trying to wake her up. I keep my eye on that corner, and it's still growing. She wakes up, and I just say, "Look up." She lets out a frightened gasp, wakes up her boyfriend, and he gets a look too. He quickly gets up, and we all leave the room, head down the stairs, and out the front door. We were standing outside. My mom and her boyfriend were speaking to each other, trying to make sense of what we saw. After what felt like a long time, the boyfriend slowly makes his way back into the apartment. In every room, he makes sure to flip on the lights. We make it to the bedroom. He flips the lights on and nothing. There's no black mold-like substance in the corner anymore. We all just stand there for a while. They chat amongst themselves, saying that maybe they should just stay in the living room. Which we did. 2. I was at my grandma's house. My grandma always had toys for me at her place. Toy soldiers, blocks, cars, ect. One day I was in the hallway of her one-story house, playing with little army men. My grandma, just around the corner, sitting in her chair, watching old TV shows and crocheting a blanket. As I'm playing, I get an overwhelming sense that something evil is close to me. I look up from the floor to see a strange thing. It's all black, about the same width of the hallway. It's all jagged, floating above the floor, with glowing red dots all over, kind of reminding me of like a cartoon bat's eyes. It hovers down the hallway in my direction, and I immediately get up and run away from it. Make my way around the corner to the living room where my grandma was. I run past her, going to the window that had these see-through curtains. Of course now that's probably the crappiest hiding place. But I hide myself inside of them. These see-through curtains were white and had different sorts of designs on them, including angles when playing trumpets. As I'm standing there, my grandma looks up and says, "Are you hiding?" in a cheerful voice. I say nothing. I just wait. But nothing ever came into the living room. After a while, I come out of the curtains and just stay in the living room with my grandma. Many hours later, I decided to go check down the hall. There was nothing there. This all happened when I was 6 years old, and I still remember it so vividly. Just to preface, I'm open to the idea of the paranormal, but for the most part I'm still a skeptic. I'm one of those I wouldn't be surprised if ghosts really existed, but for now, I don't think they do sort of people. I believe there is an explanation for any paranormal experience we face, whether it's simple or complicated. My parents had immigrated from Vietnam in the 80s and did the whole Ellis Island immigration process. They've lived all over the country, but fast forward to 1993, where they had me in California. In 1999, my family was pretty poor and decided that we wanted to try and get a place with my cousin's family, my dad's brother's family. They went searching for a house in Sacramento, California. They found a place that was oddly cheap. If I can recall correctly, it was a 5-bedroom/3-bathroom house with a gated automatic fence. This was really fancy back then, and a decently sized lot. Now here are the details that were told to me later in life when I got older and spoke to my parents about the house. There was obviously a catch to the low price point of this house. The offering price was due to the fact that it was known to be haunted. The real estate agent was very upfront about this and mentioned the history of the house. The original owner of this home died in the nursery of the house. The nursery was located underneath the stairs, think Harry Potter cupboard but much bigger, and is actually a room. We are unsure of what the owner died from, but my parents didn't think that was necessary to know or even remember. My dad and his brother were skeptics at the time and were only interested in the price point. The real estate agent mentioned that there have been many families that lived here that experienced paranormal activity and moved out fairly quickly. This did not stop them from taking the offer. There were many things that we experienced in this house, some very typical, such as creaky pipes/wood, extreme sudden cold temps, footsteps, etc. However, I'd like to just share what I deem to be the creepiest moments. Although it was a 5-bedroom house, we had to share rooms due to 2 families living in it. I shared a room with 2 of my cousins, both around my age. One of the nights I remembered, this was a couple weeks living here, and we were already experiencing creepy things. I really needed a drink of water. We had a pact that if we ever went somewhere in the middle of the night, we would wake each other up and go together. So I woke up my cousins and told them to come with me to get a drink of water really quick. We had an uncle that stayed with us at the time. He's that uncle that goes from family to squat for as long as he can. He still does this to this day, that would stay anywhere he possibly could. Well, he didn't mind taking the nursery. Obviously, when we were kids, our parents didn't inform us of any of the paranormal talk they had. All of our experiences were discovered on our own. So as we walked down the stairs, we could hear our uncle groaning in his sleep, almost as though he was in pain. We sat on the stairs and continued to listen, and we were trying to make out what he was trying to say. We noticed that the name Sam kept coming up. We got our water and went back to sleep. The next day, we brought up what we heard Uncle say to our parents and told them he kept saying the name Sam. My parents looked at us in terror. They then tried to play it off and said it was nothing of concern. We were kids, but we definitely knew they were hiding something from us, but we moved on from it. When we were older and talked about this incident, our parents finally told us the truth about that incident. My parents told me and my siblings, and I eventually told my cousins, who had already been told by their parents as well. Apparently Sam is the name of the original owner who passed away in that nursery. They had not at all informed my uncle about the name of the owner. They confronted my uncle, and he had no idea what they were even talking about. This sent chills up my spine, even so many years after the experience. Here is the last experience that was pretty much the okay, we're moving motive. After maybe 4 to 5 months, we had a Lunar New Year's party. Typically these drinking parties will go on all night, and it usually ends up in a mellow talk to each other in the living room gathering to end the night sort of thing. It was probably 1 a.m. at this point, and the people that were left were all in the living room at the base of the stairs. Everyone was pretty much accounted for. As the night was dying down, everyone was chatting, and suddenly we hear doors, and maybe windows, start to slam shut upstairs one by one. This lasted maybe 10 seconds. It almost didn't sound real because it seemed like there were more doors and windows shutting than we even had. Silence, as we all stopped and stared at the top of the stairs, terrified. My dad and brother started to walk up the stairs, and some of us crept behind them. They called out to see if anyone was up there and got no response. Here's the scary part. Every single door was open. There wasn't a single door that was actually slammed shut at all. Yet we all heard the doors shut one after the other. I remember so vividly crying my eyes out when my uncle came back and said, "All the doors are open." We moved out within a week. My parents never shared with me the address of the place. They never wanted me to look it up any further. I don't blame them. However, I'd be really interested in looking up more of the history of the house. I've tried Googling things such as Sam's Sacramento haunted house but found nothing. I remember what the house looks like, but as extensively as I've tried to look it up, I can't find it. I'd be interested if anyone is able to find the house I'm looking for. I'll leave a description of the house below. 2-story white house. Very symmetrically boxy. Big 2-car garage. Black gates that surrounded the house opened up by sliding gates that led to the driveway and the garage. Grass lawn with a decent-sized tree. The backyard was pretty much just cement and dead grass. It was located in the middle of the suburban street, i.e., not a corner house, not in a circle or court, just a regular drive street address between 2 other houses. Thanks for listening. Nothing happened in my house until I brought my baby home from the hospital. So I bought my house in January of 2023, it's a brand new build, so first owner. Nothing spooky happened until I gave birth in July of 2023 and brought my baby home. I was home alone while on maternity leave, and my baby woke up for a bottle one morning. I leave the room to go make it in the kitchen, and all I hear is a deep man's voice saying something, super quick like one word. Then my baby stopped crying. So I finish making the bottle, and I walk in the room, and he's staring off, as babies do, lol, but happy as a clam. I said, "Thanks, Ghost Man." And went about my day. That story is the birth of what we call Ghost Man in our house. I don't sleep easily since I grew up in a haunted house and lived at my neighbor's haunted house after high school, so I'm used to it. But my fiancé gets scared easily. We had one of those Graco swings for our baby, and one night while my fiancé was feeding our dogs, the Graco swing turned on by itself and started swinging, lowest level, but still freaked him out. We hadn't used that swing in a few days, so I know it was turned off all the way. Another instance with my fiancé. We bought one of those motion-sensing baby monitors for the nursery, but at this time, baby was still sleeping in a crib in our bedroom, so we didn't use it. The camera was in the nursery, and the monitor was plugged in at my fiancé's desk so we could test out the range. One day I saw it was fully unplugged from the wall, and I asked him why. He said the motion sense kept turning the screen on when no one/nothing was in there, so he got scared and unplugged it. He said, "Not today, Ghost Man." We quickly realized Ghost Man was obsessed with our baby and his nursery. So fast forward a few weeks, my fiancé's parents visited and stayed in our guest bedroom, which is right next to the nursery. At this time again, baby is still sleeping in our bedroom. So we were all sitting on the couch one morning, and my Phil asked how we slept. I said fine. He said, "Really? I heard you guys in and out of the nursery all night." Me and my fiancé looked at each other, super confused, because we knew neither of us had to go in there for anything that night. I told my Phil it wasn't us, and he got very serious and said, "No. I heard one of you walk over there, open and close the door, rummage through, and then leave again at least 3 times. We were like, "Sorry, dude, it's Ghost Man." My parents got divorced in 1997, I was born in 1990, so I was 7 at the time. They stayed friends, but my mom moved out to my grandparents' old house. My grandparents had quite a lot of money and had recently moved without selling the house, so there was no problem for them to let my mother and us move into their old house. We ended up living there for about 5 years. It was me, my mother and my 2 sisters, who both are a few years older than me, and our dog. What I am going to tell you is not a chronological order since I can't remember when everything happened, but I assure you that everything I write is 100% true. The house had 3 floors. Ground floor, basement, and upper floor were where me and my sisters slept. The basement was the most horrific place in the house. The stairs led from the basement up to the first floor, then to the second floor like a spiral, and most of the steps would creak and make lots of sound when stepping on them. Several times a week, you would hear footsteps slowly walking from the basement up the stairs, taking a short break at the ground floor, then keep moving to the second floor. Most of the time, the steps would stop at my older sister's room, but they would vary, sometimes stopping outside my room or my middle sister's room. We all heard it. My mom did not like to talk about it, but my sisters and I often talked about it the day after, confirming hearing it outside whatever room it stopped by. We all hated going down to the basement. It was a big basement that you would think children would enjoy playing in, but we hated it. Our dog never went down to the basement. She hated it just as much as us. All kinds of minor things happened down in the basement. The light would turn off randomly, things moved, and you could often hear stuff moving down there even though no one was down there. One evening, me and my sisters were playing with walkie-talkies, trying to get to the local police channel, something kids did during the 90s. This time, the voice in the walkie-talkie was different and sounded much closer. The voice said all kinds of things. It was speaking directly to my oldest sister and said that it was going to hurt her. It even spoke her name, but I don't think it ever answered our questions. We got scared and turned off the walkie-talkie. A minute or so later, our dog ran into our room and barked out for nothing. Our dog was large and protective of us kids and kept staying in the room, barking, which has never happened before or after. Another time, me and my mom were home, but my sisters and dog were away. I was playing up in my room, and my mom was doing whatever moms do. Suddenly I hear really loud footsteps from the basement, even though I was on the second floor in my room, walking, almost running up from the basement, then continuing up the stairs to the second floor. I remember my heart just stopping when listening to the footsteps. My mom never walks that heavy and angry. The footsteps continued until outside my room, then stopped, and my door was slammed really hard. The door closed, and I screamed and cried. My mom raced up the stairs and tried to open the door but she couldn't. It was as if the door was locked, though I don't think the door had a locking mechanism. My mom shouted to me to be calm while she ran down to get tools to tear the door down. While she was down, and 7-8-year-old me was crying, the door suddenly unlocked itself and opened. Another time when my sisters and my dog were away, there was a storm, and for some reason I was deathly afraid of the thunder. I have never been afraid of thunder before or after, but this night I was, and in the basement everything went crazy. We heard things thrown around down there, glass shattering, which we confirmed in the morning after that glass and stuff had been thrown around and shattered. There were footsteps running up and down the stairs, and me and my mother hugged each other, both scared of what we were hearing. At one time, we were sitting in the living room, just being deathly scared. The entrance door flew open, then closed, opened, and closed again for several minutes. It was a storm outside, and it was blowing, but this was not the storm. Many more minor things happened, but these are what came to mind. It seemed to me that it got worse when my dog was not around, and it was more after my older sister. Even though I told you about the things that happened to me, she had many more experiences. A couple of times, she claimed that she saw an old man watching her sleep. I have not talked to anyone about these experiences except my mom and sisters, so I think I just needed to write this off. If you have any questions about the house or the experiences, just ask. We lived in the house between 1997 and 2002. The screaming shadow in the corner of the room. Growing up, my cousin and I spent a lot of time together. We were the type that would get trouble for laughing and giggling well after the midnight hour. We often stayed at our grandparents' house, out in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina. At the very end of the dirt road that their house was off, there was a very old, dilapidated house with a haunting history. According to Pa via the previous landowner, the house was the property of a woman left after the remaining members of her family had long passed. She dabbled in things occult related and was said to have practiced black magic. Curses on people and using the gifts she was said to have for negativity. She kept to herself and was ridiculed, unwelcome within at the time the small town that inhabited the area. After a very negative encounter with someone in the local Stop and Shop store, she was said to have gone home, created a curse, and then took her life to finalize the hex on the home and the land. Any future inhabitants of her home would experience paranormal, and some even said demonic activity. One night as we were having a sleepover over my cousin, who we will call T, and I decided that it would be a good night to visit the haunted house at the end of the dirt road. We waited until our grandparents fell asleep, and all we had to listen for was the loud and obnoxious snoring of Paw Paw. Once we heard the infamous snoring, we knew we were home free. So, dressed in all black clothing, we snuck foot first out of the bedroom window. It was approximately 1:45 a.m. on the way to the house. We joked and played around with one another, our conversations based on the fact that we were finally going to see the house after years of talking about going, sneaking out, and trying to hunt a ghost. We were beyond excited, so to speak. When we arrived at the house, flashlights lighting up the front exterior, we spotted the way in. Luckily it was the front door. This door was hanging loosely on its last hinge, a joke of a door, to be honest. T and I pulled at the door, and it came off its last hinge completely. Together, we laid it on what was left of the front porch and shined our lights into the room. This room was missing part of the floor that, over time, had sunken into the earth, and plants had begun inhabiting the room. We entered anyway, touring the home, and we began to discuss what we imagined it looked like in the past. The area we supposed was the kitchen. We lined it in our imaginative conversation with wooden cabinets and a gas stove. Around the corner of what was once the kitchen, I spotted a very narrow and steep staircase leading up. Neither of us had ever seen such a staircase before. I shone my light on it and called T to come look at what I had discovered. Brave as we were then, we decided that it was a wise decision to climb up and see what we found. As we climbed the stairs, we both froze in place as we heard what sounded like a woman scream as loud as she possibly could. Standing there, eyes wide, skin crawling, and hearts pounding, we both pointed our lights in the direction of the scream, but the light landed on just a wall. We then laughed that awkward laugh, the one that says we heard that, but it was something explainable, and with just our eyes, we decided that we'd keep climbing. As we reached the top of the stairs, we entered a room. This room looked as though it were not attached to the same rundown, ruined house we entered. There were papers scattered upon the floor and symbols painted on the wall. Neither of us understood, but today just the symbols on the wall would have caused me to tuck tail and run. They were symbols of conjuring. Symbols that called upon dangerous entities. Then we saw them as bad artwork and laughed, after my interest in life brought me to where I am now. At this time, I would have cleansed myself upon leaving. T stepped forward as I warned her, based on the dilapidations of the rest of the home, to be wary of where she steps. As she crossed safely, I followed behind, and as I did, the floor began creaking and almost screaming under my feet. I took 6 steps toward T when the area of the floor I was standing on collapsed and down we both fell, the flooring landing on us both. T was able to wiggle her way out, but I was stuck. There was no way I was pulling myself out from under the flooring, as most of it landed upon me. And to make the situation worse, a huge piece of the floor blocked the only safe way in and out of the house. As T struggled to move the flooring off me, causing bursts of pain from my knee down, I analyzed our situation, trying like hell to come up with an escape plan. Neither of us had phones, only one of us now had a flashlight, and we were not supposed to be there at all. This night quickly took a terrifying turn. In the back of both our minds, we never forgot the scream. I locked eyes on a small window just big enough for T to get out of. I pointed this out to her and handed her my flashlight as she made her way to the window, pulled herself up, and put her feet out. Slipping out the window again feet first, she left me in the complete empty but full of possibilities darkness. My scanning of the room in panic was interrupted by T yelling out in pain. I called out to her, asking what happened, and she informed me that under that window was what we referred to as sticky briar bushes, so she slid out of the window and dropped about 5 feet directly into thorns. I could hear her call out in pain as she struggled to rip herself out of the bushes and into freedom. Continuously scanning the room, allowing every shadow darker than the next to cause my heart to accelerate, I spotted something. Something that was not in place. I spotted a silhouette of a woman crouched in the corner, staring right at me. Beyond terror at this point, I called out to T, asking her where she was she close to the entrance, to answer me. As I watched this silhouette stand at its feet and take one step towards me, I screamed. T replied with a scream of her own as she inched her way out of the briars. "I'm out," she yelled at me, but I was completely shocked in place, my words unable to come out. I swear my mouth moved. "Hurry, T." But nothing but gasps came out as the silhouette came closer and closer. I shut my eyes tight and started trying to pry myself free, each tug and pull causing a searing, ripping pain through my thigh. But I wanted away from the shadow in the corner, the shadow that wanted me. I could feel all throughout me that I was in harm. I could feel the negativity this silhouette emitted. Finally able to produce my voice, I screamed in a panic for T to hurry, save me. I opened my eyes, and the silhouette was no longer a dark shadow form. She had features, they were transparent, but I could make out the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the long black hair. She was so close I could smell the death in the air. Closing my eyes again, I started crying. I was so terrified, I was questioning everything I had ever believed. The shock to my system in that moment had caused every limb in my body to run ice cold, and my fight or flight kicked in and I began to fight. I pulled and tugged through the pain as I released my leg from under the flooring. T's flashlight hit me, and I opened my eyes finally as the woman shifted back into nothing but a shadow. T was standing there, staring into the empty space that the woman stood in, her eyes never leaving the wall. She saw her too, she saw the last of her. I watched her the entire time I was there. I to this day have never spoke with T about the woman, because what is there to say? Did you see her too? That doesn't do that moment any justice. I know she saw her, and I know she was as petrified with fear as I was. We made it back to our window and back onto our air mattress bed, right before our grandparents woke for church. Lying, our faces covered, pretending to have been asleep the entire time, we denied joining them for church, stating that T had a bad headache and I was going to stay and tend to her. Once they left and we were sure they would not turn around for something forgotten, we threw the blankets down and assessed our injuries. T was covered in thorn pricklies, and I had 3 gashes in what looked like claw marks on the inside of my thigh, blood seeping through the rips in my jeans. We patched each other up, and though we knew the gashes in my leg most likely needed stitches, we did the patching ourselves and never told a soul. I still wear the scar on my right thigh, to the side above the kneecap. A permanent memory searing the eyes of the shadow woman in my mind forever. I still dream of her, and when I do, she's asking me to return. Or she's fading into view, her features becoming prominent from the shadows. Even in my dreams, I feel the evil she eludes, I feel the terror, and I'll wake up sweating. My sleep paralysis moments always involve her. Have I carried her all this time? Haunted tales of the old brick farmhouse. Last summer, I spent a week on the family farm, where I often go during the summers to hang out and party with friends and family, ride dirt bikes, and explore. The family farm actually consists of 3 houses and 2 properties. My grandparents live in the original family house, a rather creepy and very outdated Victorian farmhouse, but it's pretty warm and cozy downstairs where they live. Grandpa is disabled, so the upstairs is really just used for storage. A lot of the rooms are stuffed to the ceilings with boxes of antiques and are original to the nearly 120-year-old house, original wallpaper, doors, windows, and the like. On a corner of that land is where my Uncle A lives. His house is a new custom build with only 1 brand new shed, so nothing interesting goes on there. Then there is my Uncle B's house, located about a mile down the road from my Uncle A's place, which is also a recent build but sits on the foundation of a darker place. About 15 years ago, there was a big brick house, similar in size but slightly bigger than my grandparents' current house, standing where my Uncle B's current house stands now. The demolition crews knocked everything down except for the lean-to garage, which now goes into the new house rather than the brick house. The brick house was knocked down and buried in the ground, which I'll get to later. I was talking with my aunt over breakfast one morning at my grandparents' last summer when the tale of the old brick house was brought up. My aunt absolutely hated the brick house, as it was very spooky to her. She described the layout of the house upstairs. There were, I think, 5 rooms upstairs and a couple rooms downstairs. My grandpa was still able-bodied back then, so everyone had their rooms upstairs. My dad wasn't even born yet when the spooky things began. My aunt said that the room in the back of the house upstairs was the most haunted room. She vividly recalls playing in that room as a little girl on multiple occasions. The closet door would always be clicked shut, and she made sure of it. She said that she'd hear the knob turn and the closet would slowly creak open. Sometimes, she claimed, there was a black shadow person with red eyes in there that stood very tall, but other times, it was empty. Each time, she'd run to wherever her parents were and stay there. She also told me of the footsteps she'd hear late at night, walking down the hallway or up the stairs, and when checked, there'd be nobody. Sometimes, a shadow would pass under her door as the footsteps went by. Other doors would also swing open and shut, things would go missing and reappear in strange places, lights would flicker or turn on and off on their own, and phantom voices were also heard. Just a lot of cliché haunted house stuff, I guess. My uncles also reported similar happenings, although they were quite young when my grandparents decided to move back into my grandpa's childhood home, the farmhouse they live in now. When they moved, my dad was born, and my grandpa's health was beginning to fail a bit, so my uncles and aunt lived upstairs, while dad stayed in the room adjacent to my grandparents' room. Strangely enough, the room that my dad had as a baby was turned into a bathroom about 6 months later. Don't ask me where they'd shower before an actual shower was put in place, because IDK, fast forward some years. My aunt moved to the city for college and started a family, while my grandparents moved back to the brick house. My Uncle B was nearly an adult, so he was preparing to possibly move into the Victorian house, which was more or less a dingy party house in the late 80s/early 90s. But my dad and Uncle A were still teens. My dad said that the brick house was haunted, but he actually liked it more than the Victorian house. He doesn't know why he liked it so much, even when there were weird bumps in the night and a dark shadow man running around, but he chalks it up to the fact that the Victorian house had gotten pretty disgusting from all the weekend parties, and even today the electromagnetic field surrounding the Victorian farmhouse is off, I guess is the word. Something in the air will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up in certain places on the farm, and the barn cats avoid the front lawn like the plague for some reason. My Uncle A, on the other hand, disliked the brick house just as much as my aunt did, because he too was scared of the shadow man. Eventually, both of my uncles moved out of the house, leaving my dad alone. However, Uncle B's wife did not like the Victorian house despite renovation efforts at all, so my grandparents and uncle switched homes. About 15 years ago, my uncle got sick of the brick house. He said it was just too old, outdated, dingy, and haunted for him to happily raise a family in anymore. So he had it knocked down. I wish I had the video, perhaps I'll email my aunt for it if this gets enough attention, but my Uncle A recorded the whole demolition process. There is a huge well about 10 yards from the current house, with a diameter of about 15 feet, in which they buried the brick house. When everything was said and done, my Uncle A reviewed the footage and was shocked at what he captured. For a brief few frames before the claw of the excavator came upon the house again, you can see into the shadow man's room, where the closet door is wide open, and the shadow man is standing in it as his house gets destroyed. Some interesting history. After hearing this story and studying the video, I thought about the history, and I realized the local church's older cemetery is on the croplands of my Uncle B's farm. I know this thanks to Google Maps and my adventures on the dirt bike. Not only that, but there was a lot of American Indian and settler activity, as the farm is not far from the Mississippi River, and a lot of the land that the farms stand on is former Native American territory. My Uncle A has uncovered boxes and boxes of arrowheads, spearheads, knife blades, sharpening stones, tapping stones, and other Indian artifacts from the farmlands he's plowed and explored, including his own. He also found a set of limestone foundation bricks while wandering around his property, hinting at some unknown settlers who came long before my own family came. So, who or what are the spirits that haunted the brick house and very possibly wandered the land today? Are they the spirits of fallen braves from long ago, or perhaps they're lost souls from the old cemetery jutting into the croplands, barely a quarter mile from Uncle B's farm? Who knows, but what is known is that the brick house is buried literally a few paces outside of the current home's basement door and offers a creepy insight into the past. I'm convinced my house is haunted. We moved into our house about 7 years ago. Since we've been here, several things have happened that make me think we're not alone here. This is one of the first. I was in the basement one day, digging through a closet to get to a tackle box for some fishing hooks. Our house is a split level, so the basement is only half underground, and enough light comes through the windows during the day that I normally don't turn on the lights when I go down there. I found the hooks I was looking for and set them on a table by the closet. As I was putting the tackle box back, I must have caught the edge of the hook box, and it fell to the floor, spilling all over. I bent over to start picking them up, and just as I did, the light in the basement turned on. At first, I didn't think it was paranormal. I thought my husband had come home from work. It was close to the time he was expected. I thought he must have come home, found me downstairs, and saw me spill the hooks, so he turned on the light to help me see better. I even said thanks to him. When I heard no response, I called his name and still got no response. I went to investigate, and he wasn't home. I was home alone with my dog. That light has never turned on before or since. The switch was flipped up, so something moved the switch to turn it on. The doors were still all closed and locked. I still don't know what caused the light to come on. Since then, a bunch of other things have happened. One time I was upstairs cleaning. We have one of those Electrolux vacuums that isn't a normal upright vacuum. I don't know what the term is for them. It has a large button that has to be pushed in order for it to turn on, and once the main unit is on, there's a switch on the sweeper part that has to be turned on to start the rollers. I had just gotten done sweeping the stairs, and I turned it off but left the vacuum in the living room still plugged in because that was the next room to be done. I went down the hall to switch laundry and hear the vacuum start up. The dog was with me, and we both turned to look at the vacuum at the same time. It was visible from the hall where we were. There was nothing there, but the vacuum was on/running. It's never turned on before by itself and hasn't since. One time, my husband was home with me, and I saw a figure. We had just gotten home from getting groceries, and the plan was for me to get food/water for the dog bowls, and he was going to take some of the groceries to the basement. We keep our dog food canister in the basement in a little closet under the stairs, different closet than the hooks. I went down to get the dog food, and I saw, what I thought was my husband, come down the stairs out of my peripheral vision. It came down the stairs, stood behind me for a second, then went towards where we keep the canned food/pop in the basement. I got the food, then asked my husband, who I thought had just come downstairs, if there was more to bring down. No response. I ask again, thinking I just didn't hear him. No response. I go around the corner to where it went, and there is nothing there. I was alone in the basement. I take the dog food upstairs and find my husband, who is at the complete opposite end of the house. I asked him about being downstairs. He hadn't even walked downstairs yet. The kicker, my husband does not believe in ghosts/spirits/paranormal. He always dismissed it/acted like I was crazy anytime something happened. Until this happened. He was home alone, other than the dog, and I was on the phone with him because I just left work and had called to see if he needed anything. He was in the middle of a sentence, and he just went silent. It scared me because I thought something happened to him. Then he tells me, "Hold on, someone's here." I thought that was strange because I didn't hear the dog bark. He comes back on the line and says, "I'm going to have to call you right back. I just saw someone at the door, and I don't know where they went." I wait for the call back. He calls back. He went outside and checked the perimeter of the house, the outbuildings, and the garage. Nothing. He swears he saw someone in a flannel shirt walking outside the door, but there was no one there. We live in the middle of nowhere, our closest neighbors are miles away, and there's nowhere someone could have hit as fast or easily as they did if it was a real person out there. The dog never acted like he saw anything at all. I occasionally smell cigarette smoke in one corner of the basement. It's the only place in the house I've smelled it. We don't smoke, so it's pretty noticeable when I smell it. I never see any smoke. I've noticed a lot of other strange things in the house, but I've always been able to debunk them as other things, and I actually thought I might have been going crazy seeing things until my husband saw it too. He now believes everything I've said or seen. The house isn't that old, was built in the 70s. We bought it from his family, and no one has passed away here that we're aware of, but there was a much older house on the property at one time that was demolished when this one was built. As a side note, I do not have normal hearing. I'm actually deaf on one side with normal hearing on the other, so it's normal for him to come home and be in the house without me hearing it, depending on which direction I'm facing and where I'm at in the house. It's part of the reason we got the dog. The dog alerts when anyone comes down the driveway. I always keep the doors locked when I'm home alone. Do you think it's haunted, or am I crazy? Shadow people in my house. I am a teen boy living in Y with my parents and 2 younger siblings. I swear, everything I say is true, and I'm not kidding or making the facts more scary at all. I am genuinely afraid of this thing. Anyway, I saw a shadow person in my hall while I was typing on my PC yesterday, and I keep hearing noises in the basement when I go down there. The noises don't care if there are more than one person down there, and they seem to become aggressive if you don't pay attention to them. I am a Christian, Baptist, so I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in angels and demons. Anyway, this thing ran at me in the corner of my eye down the hall, and it moved like a poorly made stop-motion movie, like it was missing frames or something. It was short, around the height of an 8-year-old, and had an outline I can only describe as the color brown. Everything else about it was pitch black. I don't know what it is, it seems menacing, and my little brothers have also reported seeing a short, shadowy figure walking through the halls at night and feeling afraid. I've asked them about it, and we're all pretty scared by this point. On other occasions, when I've had sleepovers in the basement with my friends, I remember them telling me how scary our basement really was and how they didn't want to sleep in it again. Even though a part of me wants to see it again to prove I'm not crazy, the other half of my brain is seriously scared. I'll see this thing again. Has anyone else had experiences like this? I want honest answers. The Red House. This account is both personal and shared by my uncle/aunt, cousins, and mom. My uncle, aunt, and cousins used to live in a house in Terre Haute, which was dubbed the Red House. This house was my first paranormal encounter, not the last. My uncle and family moved into this house back in the early 1990s. It was a large 2-story shingle-style house on a corner lot that was painted red with a creepy basement. Most of it was unfinished with dirt floors and rock/stone walls, detached garage, and secret room, which I'll get to later. Our first visit to my family's new house was for Christmas in 1991. We were going to drive up from FL and spend the week of Christmas with my family. Before our visit, I remember speaking with my cousin, we'll call him CJ. He was the middle child of 3, 1 older sister and 1 younger brother. Before going up there, he would tell me that I was going to see ghosts when I came to visit. I laughed it off and told him he was crazy, as at the time I 100% did not believe ghosts were real. He would go on to tell me that he often saw numerous ghosts in his house, predominantly upstairs where his room was located. He said that only one of the ghosts would ever step foot in his room, the others would remain in the hallway and other areas of his house. Again, I laughed at his claims and told him I would believe it only if I saw it. When we arrived for Christmas week, I was surprised at how large this house was. It was easily the largest house that I'd ever stayed at, and all I could think about was playing hide and seek or manhunt inside the house with my cousins. I was staying with my cousin, who told me about the ghost in his room, as he had bunk beds. My parents stayed downstairs in a spare bedroom. As I walked upstairs to my cousin's room, I remember being in awe of how long his hallway was, but there were only 3 doors in that long hallway. The first door on the left was the bathroom, the next door on the right was my girl's, I will call her Nicole, cousin's room, and the final door at the very end of the hallway was CJ's room. His room was massive, it looked like a mini ballroom. As you walked in, straight ahead was his bunk bed and a large window behind the bed. He had his TV and video game system set up to the right and numerous toys and Hot Wheels race tracks to the left. There was also a small crawl space door along the left side wall. The first night my cousin kept me up telling me everything he had seen in his room and throughout the house. It did spook me out, but I was still very skeptical of his story. One thing that I did notice was that CJ had very dark circles under his eyes. He said it was because he could not sleep very well in the house and would often stay up most nights trying to sleep. On that first night, I listened to his stories, and we went to sleep. Nothing out of the ordinary occurred. That would change the very next day. On my second day at the house, after coming inside from playing outside, CJ and I went upstairs to watch a movie and play with some toys. We set up his Hulk Hogan tent in the middle of the room and pretended it was a stadium as we played with his wrestling figures. We had set up some spy tech toys around the room, one toy being a motion sensor that you would set at a door, and if it opened, it would beep. We set it up because my cousin Nicole would often barge in whenever or would mess with our toy setup, so that toy would alert us if she entered the room. Shortly after we were playing with the action figures in the tent started shaking lightly. I noticed it at first, but it wasn't too alarming. Not more than a minute later, it started shaking rapidly. I automatically assumed it was Nicole and looked out the door but couldn't see her. By the time I stuck my head back in the tent, the shaking stopped. CJ was frozen, still looking out the unzipped window of the tent at nothing. Seconds later, it started shaking again. I jumped out of the tent and witnessed it shake for a quick second before it stopped. I blamed CJ for somehow doing this and trying to scare me. I then thought it could have been Nicole, but as I opened his bedroom door, the spy tech toy sensor sounded off. That proved no one else other than CJ and myself was in that room. Nicole was lying on her bed watching TV. Even though that scared me, I still wasn't convinced that a ghost could have done that. I told my parents about it at dinner, and they kind of laughed it off. My uncle chimed in and said, "Did CJ's imagination get to you as well?" CJ had told his parents about the various experiences he had in the house, but they did not entertain the possibility of it being a ghost. They said it was his imagination. That night, I slept on the bottom bunk, and CJ slept on the top. The events that night will never leave my memory. As I started dozing off, CJ reached around the back side of the bunk and got my attention. He told me to look down the hall. The bunk bed was perfectly positioned where, depending on which side you slept on, you could look right down the long upstairs hallway. Where I was lying, all I had to do was turn my head, and I could get that vantage point. As I looked down the hall, I saw a very slender and tall man. He had on a toboggan and a long coat. I could distinctly make out his face, and it appeared to be covered in soot or a dusty powder. He was walking very slowly towards our room, but I could not see anything under his knees, like his legs stopped at the knee. It scared the shit out of me. He disappeared before getting to the room, which was a few seconds, even though it felt like an eternity. I was so frightened that I couldn't move. I just turned my head and buried it in my pillow. I recall shaking from fear when a few minutes later I was overcome by an ice-cold sensation coming from the side of my body that faced the door. I slowly turned around and saw a woman, clear as day. She had tattered clothing and was holding a cat. She was literally inches from me. She was also musky, like she had on stale perfume, but it was a very light smell. This may sound cheesy, but she resembled the Fratelli mom from the Goonies, body type wise. I did not see her face. I couldn't even scream for my parents. I again turned around and got deep in under my sheets with the pillow over my head. As soon as I woke up, I ran downstairs and told my mom. This time, my mom didn't shrug it off like before. Instead, she said everything would be fine and some things couldn't be explained. A few days later was Christmas. After we opened our presents, we went outside to ride bikes and rollerblade. My mom went upstairs to take a shower. She was alone in the house. As she was in the shower, she heard the door open and footsteps getting closer to the shower. She assumed it was my stepdad, but it wasn't, as he was outside with us. She spoke out to him but did not receive a response. As she pulled back the shower curtain, she noticed the open door and was quickly hit in the face with a cold burst of air. It knocked her back a few steps, but she did not fall. Her towel and clothes then fell off the bathroom countertop onto the ground. After taking a shower, she walked outside and asked my stepdad if he had entered the bathroom at any time. He had not. She told me this years after this visit, when I was late in my teens. She also told me that the house had creeped her out after our first night there. She felt like she was being watched and also felt a breath on her neck while walking alone down the hallway. We left a few days after Christmas. I felt so terrible that my CJ had to continue living in that house and be tormented like he was. It wasn't soon after that activity picked up and my uncle and aunt started having their own experiences, which ultimately led to them selling the house and moving a few blocks away. I want to share some of the paranormal events that they encountered. These are the experiences they had and are not in any particular order. They are simply accounts that I recall them telling me. 1. They had an old German shepherd named Yankee. He had bad hip problems and was an indoor/outdoor dog. He loved staying in their detached garage and would hide in it during storms. One night something spooked him so bad that he jumped out the small window located in the garage that was almost 6 feet off the ground. 2. They found him pawing at the back door. They once went on vacation, and when they got back, they found their huge 500-gallon fish tank busted open and the fish all dead. This tank had very thick glass, and there were no signs of anything falling or breaking it open. 3. My youngest cousin, Joe, was at the top of the stairs and Nicole was at the bottom. They were playing with a slinky. All of a sudden, Nicole said it appeared like Joe was pushed from behind as his body slingshot forward and he fell down the stairs, breaking his clavicle. She didn't see anyone push him, she just described what it looked like. 4. Before they moved out of the house, they decided to further explore the crawl space in CJ's room. They thought the crawl space didn't lead anywhere, but that house was dubbed the Red House because it was painted red. The first year that my family lived in the house, their landlord had hired painters to paint the exterior of the house yellow. Within a few months, the red bled right through the exterior. Supposedly this wasn't the first time someone attempted to paint the house a different color, but after each attempt the pale red color would return. 6. The final straw that caused my family to break their lease and move out early was on the night of CJ's first Little League baseball game of the season. CJ and my uncle were already at the ball fields. My aunt got Nicole and Joe in the car, which was parked in the detached garage that was directly behind the house. The driveway of the garage faced the side street. My aunt went around the house and turned off all of the lights in the house except for a lamp in the living room, the kitchen light, and the exterior lights. It was already dusk by this time. As they pulled out of the garage driveway and drove around to the front side of the house, my aunt looked up at the house and noticed every single light in the house, every room window, was turned on. It stopped her in her tracks. As she continued to stare at the house, she noticed the curtains in CJ's room open and a dark shadow/silhouette of a person in the window. My aunt drove to the ball fields that night and told my uncle that it was time to move. A short time later they did. Numerous neighbors knew that the house was haunted and would often tell my uncle and aunt. My cousins would also hear it at school, as the local kids all knew about the house's history. One of the neighbors told my uncle that numerous people died in that house, ranging from murders to suicides, and the house had been inhabited throughout its history by some very shady and malevolent people. The same neighbor told my uncle that there were at least 5 spirits in that house, some being evil or demonic. My family never took the time to confirm any of those stories. Once they moved, they wanted nothing else to do with that house. Something is really wrong with our new house. Okay, so this happened 2 nights ago. I awoke suddenly and saw it was 3 a.m. The house was super quiet, and I was by myself since my husband was at work. I rubbed my eyes, convincing myself it was just another restless night, but as I settled back into bed, a strange feeling washed over me. And it wasn't because I binge-watched Ghost Encounters, lol. I looked around the dimly lit room. Then I heard a soft whisper, barely audible but distinct enough to send chills down my spine. I sat up, straining to listen. It seemed to be coming from the hallway. And I began sweating profusely, my pants were soaked. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but curiosity tugged at me since I was alone. I put my legs over the side of the bed and stood up, but still under the comforter. As I crept down the hallway, the whisper grew clearer, and I noticed a light down the hall toward the living room. My heart raced, and I literally thought I was going to have a heart attack. I had to breathe because my mouth was turning into a cotton mouth. I turned the corner. In the darkness of the corner by the lamp stood a dark shadow figure. Sweat began dripping off my arm and down my back, even my hair was wet. I could barely breathe, frozen in place. The whispers were barely noticeable, but it seemed to say, "Help me." I was so scared I was frozen and drenched in sweat. It suddenly moved toward my nanny's old mirror hanging on the wall. My heart pounded in my chest, and I stumbled back, falling backwards into the hallway onto the floor. My comforter stuck and intertwined between my legs, my arms unable to move and my knees numb. I crawled back to my room so fast I had bruises all over my knees and shins. I don't think I ever moved that fast. I jumped back into my bed under the covers, unable to get the courage to change out of my wet clothing. I stayed under the covers until daylight and called out of work because of the lost sleep. I don't know what to do. This is the first paranormal encounter at my house, and I had to share this one. We just moved into this house a month ago. Any suggestions? I'm literally terrified to the core. I'm also going to see about putting up some cameras. There are some really messed up reasons to live in a haunted house. I, being of sound mind and body, don't know any of them, but I am superstitious as all hell. So when the wife and I moved up to New Hampshire, right on the Vermont border, we were looking for a place to rent for a year or two before buying a house. Now, for all the New Englanders here, my wife is a native, I'm not. She's used to New England and the vastness this small area has. There are places even she won't let me travel to after a certain hour because, that route you have to take? People don't come back from it. Of course, I'm not a native, so I don't know this. So when I was working, I would come home late after dark from work and tell her I took X route, she would kind of look in shock and awe at my stupidity. We found a home right on the above-mentioned border on the Vermont side. We loved it. It was a fantastic place to live. Except the basement. I could not shake the feeling of being watched and stalked, like prey. So, like any reasonable adult, I just said duck it and didn't go down there except during the day. So, one night, after gaming for hours in my loft/office/man cave, I got hungry. Went downstairs, kissed the missus, and walked past my basement door towards my kitchen. I don't know if anyone listening has gone hunting, but there is a moment you sometimes experience, especially hunting predators like coyote, wolf, bear, etc. Sometimes, they know you have them in your sight. Sometimes, they look towards you, not quite at you, but it feels like they are boring into your soul, saying, "You got me, make it quick." It's an eerie feeling, and sometimes you take the shot, sometimes you don't. On that night, as I was walking past that door downstairs, I saw red eyes and a humanoid figure. And I froze. I stopped dead in my ducking tracks. I gave that same look of "you got me, make it quick." After that momentary lapse of sanity, I just scooted real quick away from the door, grabbed a weapon, and called my wife, saying someone was downstairs, call the police. There is no other entrance to the basement, and I had the door covered with my weapon from a safe position, where I could easily run from the house. Cops show up, I disarm, they clear the house, they find no person, but a set of muddy footprints that start facing towards the stairs up, that then proceed to walk into a wall in the back corner of the basement by the water heater. For some context, the wall in question also blocked off the area directly under my bedroom. It was a solid wall, with a small crawl space and about maybe 4 inches of clearance on the other side of it. Cops call detectives, detectives check it, they can't see anyone in it, they can't enter it. Photographs are taken, shoe sizes compared, my feet too big, my wife's feet too small. Get a reliable contact number for the detective. My wife and I stay at a hotel for a couple nights. For months afterwards, I would have the same thing happen, eventually minus the cops. It actually got relatively normal. Good old red eyes, in the basement, chillin' like a villain. Wife was less enthused by my antics, cheerfully just going about, and when I would spot red eyes, I would always give him a cheery good time of day, how you doing? Of which, we would still have muddy footprints, and I would just clean them up. So, COVID hits, lockdowns happen, and we have an opportunity to move to a better house, one where we would be able to work at home better. The main reason the home was better was we had a mold issue in this house. It was in between the panes of glass and the windows. Every day we were cleaning it up from window sills and door frames. Hell, we had to replace pieces of furniture multiple times, and we are very clean people. We notified the landlord over multiple months and eventually a year, and after their actions weren't helping at all, we decided to move. The landlord decided to get a housing inspector out there immediately after we left. Inspector comes and verifies there is a mold issue. IDK if they met red eyes. However, they did find a metric ton of readings of high spore counts on the wall bordering the space below my old bedroom. The wall where the footprints always ended. So, since it was filled, the inspector scoops a little bit of the earth on the other side of the wall through that crawl space. It wasn't earth, as in dirt. It was approximately 7 feet of mold. The landlord then immediately contacted specialists to remove all of it and notified me to offer some kind of damages for it in the form of refunded partial rent payments. All in all, it made my 2020 pretty good. Until about 3 months later. The landlord calls me and offers to send me a full refund of all rent from the time I was living there, minus what she already gave. Why? There was a corpse. The medical examiner said it was the man who owned the property before my landlord. He was a lineman who, after talking to surviving family members, wore a size 8 shoe. Smaller than my size 11 shoes, bigger than my wife's shoes by a mile. Duck me, red eyes. I don't know how you got there, but hell bud, I hope you now found peace. Sorry for not checking it out sooner. I did, after reading about his obituary and contacting his family, swing by his final resting place to drop off flowers, place a stone, and share a good morning, like I used to. Until better times, red eyes. I saw someone or something last night. I am an 18-year-old female. I'm not sure what I'm about to put on here is truly scary or just me tripping out, but here it goes. I was doing my usual night stimming, something I usually do due to being autistic and needing an outlet to relax. For me, that is usually walking back and forth at night, pacing and standing in the dark hallway talking to myself, or even when the light is on depending on the time of day, I guess. Anyhow, I was just doing my thing, relaxing, and just enjoying myself. I took a break to stop pacing and just stand in front of my parents' door. I think I went in there at one point to use their bathroom, but I closed the door otherwise and just kind of did my thing after. But I digress. So I was just standing there minding my business, doing whatever, and for some reason had my eyes closed. And like any normal person, since I wasn't sleeping, I thought it was a good idea to just open them and continue what I was doing. However, when I did, I saw someone standing there, right in front of me. Moreover, I should say a dark silhouette of a woman or just a person standing there. I couldn't really see her face or anything, but I was taken back and a little afraid. My response after trying to fully process what I was seeing was to scream and cover my eyes. I then called out to my mom. It took her a little time to respond, which made me a little more scared due to the short period of time I had to wait, which felt like forever after seeing what I just saw. My mom eventually called out to me and asked if I was okay. My older sister called out after and asked if I was okay too. They both gave me a hug and said they were sorry I went through that. Not long after, my mom invited me to watch a cartoon with her, and my sister asked if I was coming back into our room. I told her I wasn't and went to watch TV with my mom. She asked me what I saw, and I said I thought I saw a woman. She felt the reason I saw this figure was because we were watching Dirty Pop, the boy band scam about Lou Pearlman and his horrible treatment towards the boy bands he created and helped make famous. As well as everyone involved in his nasty schemes, hurting them as well. Highly recommend, by the way. She said because of the creepy music and the imagery we had seen in the series, that's maybe what fueled this to take place. I'm not entirely sure that is the case, honestly. She also stated she didn't understand why they couldn't just say what happened and why they had to show so much. Although, not going to lie, that's the whole point of why we were watching it. How would we know what went down if we didn't see any imagery or video of what happened? On a lighthearted note though, me and my mom watched Kipper on Prime Video, and then she asked if I wanted to sleep with her for the night since she has been lonely because of how much my dad has to work overnight as his job, to which I said yes. So that was nice. To close out, I don't know what really fueled this to happen. Maybe it was the documentary on Netflix, maybe it was purely my imagination, maybe it was the horror shorts party and the other scary things I watch on YouTube. Or maybe, for all we know, it was my deceased grandmother who died in 2019 when she was a younger adult. At least, that's what I'm conjuring up. But I don't really truly know, so yeah. I need some help. How do I get a demon out of my house? Okay, to preface, my family, specifically my mom's side, has a long history of paranormal activity. Great-great-grandma did some witchcraft back in her country and got her home burned down because of it. Great-grandma used to interpret dreams and such, was able to see the future through dreams, and accurately predicted a lot of my grandma's, her daughter's, life. My mom had a lot of ghost stories and things she saw when she was a kid. For example, she told me when she was younger she saw a woman that she believed was death itself, asking for her mom, Grandma. She told her that her mom was in the hospital, and the woman just told her, "You're a good kid, it's a shame what happens to good kids like you," and left. A few hours later, my grandma was dead. That part isn't paranormal, she'd been battling cancer for a few years. But she was getting better and was expected to be able to go home the next week. My mom never saw her again, and nobody she talked to ever said they saw someone similar. Everyone except great-grandma was at home and around the house. Even one of my uncles showed up right at that same spot, not even minutes later, and he said he didn't see anyone leave or even be there. Mind you, this is all in a small town, and nearly 40 years ago, no technology and no real outside influence meant everyone was always outside. Everyone always knew or saw something, even if it was just another person, and it was miles away from society, so it should be impossible that no one else saw this woman. Anyways, one last thing, I occasionally have premonitions, but they happen in dreams, things that happen days, months, or years in advance. I sometimes see in dreams and wake up, forget, and then remember randomly. Okay, so now on to the real problem I'm having. A few years ago, I was home alone when I heard an intense knocking at the door, which is common around where I live, but the way they were knocking felt like they were trying to knock the door down. I got myself armed and went to open the door. I checked through the peek hole, and there was nothing there. I opened the door, but again, there was nothing there. It's happened a few more times, but it's less and less frequent. The problem is that since then strange things have been going on around the house. A lot of things are moved around when no one is home. I have a bookshelf in the living room with a few pictures of my grandparents, and all of them were flipped around, like they turned their backs to me. Sometimes when I look at the end of the hallway where the bathroom is, I see like a woman just peering around the doorframe and disappearing into the room after a few seconds. Other times I see shadows or black outlines of people around the house. And lastly, and the worst experience I've had so far, I was heading to bed and had to turn on a hallway nightlight for my parents. They're a bit old and need the light, and also the darkness still spooks me a bit. When I was walking through the hall, I saw a shadow on the wall just running straight at me. I don't know how to describe it, but it looked like it was running down the hall. I don't know what it is or if I'm going crazy. I researched online, and apparently opening a door when you hear a knock and nobody is home brings a demon into your home. Some help would be appreciated. So when I was a kid, about 12 to 14, I was being haunted by something in my childhood home. Now I have a few stories of things happening, but right now I'm particularly interested in figuring out more about a man I saw. I was 13 to 14 when this happened, and for the most part I was used to weird or creepy things happening in my house, like stuff being moved around, weird noises, etc. And it's also important to know that I had a cat, Lyric, who slept in my room with me every night. This night I went to bed like usually with Lyric snuggled up next to me, but I had a very strange dream. In my dream I woke up in my bed and my bedroom looked the exact same as when I fell asleep, but this time there was an old man standing in front of my bedroom door. He was about 6 tall, wearing what I would call pioneer clothes. A loose white button-up with cuff sleeves, brown pants being held up by suspenders, and brown leather shoes. He also had a white beard and white hair pulled into a comb-over. The creepy thing was he had no eyes, just black sockets where his eyes should be. Even with him having no eyes, I felt sure that he was watching me. As soon as I saw him, I felt a wave of dread run through me, and all I wanted to do was run, but he was blocking my bedroom door, and my bedroom windows were too high off the ground for me to jump. I also had this overwhelming sense that if I did try to run, he would get me. So I convinced myself that this was just a really ducked up dream, and if I could wake myself up, it would be over. So I laid back down and eventually woke myself back up. For a second I was relieved that the ordeal was over, but I look over to my cat, Lyric, and see that she is shaking in fear. Her fur is puffed up to triple her usual size, and her eyes are huge. She's growling in a really low tone that I never heard her make before, and she's staring at the exact spot the man was standing in my dream. This made me believe that it was not a dream but a window into what was really happening, since my cat reacted to the spot he was standing even after I was awake. Safe to say it took a long time for us to go back to sleep, but eventually the feeling of being watched went away, and she settled back down next to me. I never saw him again after that, but I've been left with so many questions ever since. Was he the ghost of a man or something pretending to be one? Why did he just show up for that instance and then never come back? And what's the significance of him having no eyes? The day I wanted to forget and haunts me years later. Maybe to some this isn't terrifying. But for me, it changed my life forever. It made me realize there's another side to our lives that we don't fully understand, whether it's an afterlife or a different dimension. A place bad spirits go or something, or a force beyond our understanding. This is about an Ouija board. Of course, my mom always told me never to play with one, but I was a stupid teenager. It was nuts because we didn't actually have a board. My friend just knew how to draw one out, so we got a poster board. She wrote it out. We made the makeshift heart thing. She explained how it all works, so we sat around, the three of us, and we started playing. I automatically assumed one of my girlfriends was moving it around, because it was moving around pretty smoothly and answering all of our questions clearly. That's what I always assume when I think about people playing. It was until it said something really creepy to us that we kind of started getting mad at each other. We were asking the usual questions teenage girls would ask: who would lose their virginity first? It told us who, what order, at what ages, and the names of the guys we would be with. Honestly, it was so descriptive it almost seemed real, but it was strange. The one girlfriend who was religious and really controlled by her parents said she would lose it first. At the time, it made no freaking sense. She said I would lose it last and the other girl in the middle. Then we asked, who would get married? It said who would get married, didn't say the partners' names, but it did say who would get divorced and have kids and whatnot. It said the one girl that was religious would never get married, the other girl would get married and divorced, and I would get married and never divorced. I guess all the questions and answers were just entertaining, but kind of starting to rub the wrong way. No feelings were getting hurt, but it was weird. That's when it started to get weird. One of us asked, will we be friends forever? The whatever it was we spoke to said, no, that two of them would be friends, but that they wouldn't be friends with me anymore. I remember getting upset. I looked up, not removing our hands. We were all confused discussing who's moving it. We all looked terrified. We all swore that none of us were moving it. At that moment, we're all kind of pissed about the things that were being said because it was kind of offending every single one of us at this point. It was in that moment I knew I wasn't moving it, and I knew they wouldn't lie about this. It was too weird. Everything was so detailed and strange. And it was almost insulting, saying the religious girl would be the one who had intercourse first and never married. It was saying she would lose it in a car. Why would she say that about herself? At that time, only I had had a boyfriend, so me losing it last seemed off. So everyone was kind of getting offended by the things it was saying. AKA one wasn't getting married, one divorced, so as much as it would prop one of us up, it would pull us down too. We ended up asking it to say something that would prove it was real, something that only it knew that we didn't. It said, Bruce was cheating on his wife Kelly, and they'd get a divorce. Who the heck is Bruce and Kelly? It just kept repeating itself, so we just kind of ignored it and moved on. As teenagers, we didn't really give a shit about people getting divorced. What it said next was really creepy and sent us into a tizzy, among all the questions we were asking. After we knew it wasn't us moving it, we looked back down at the board, and we didn't say anything. It just started to move. It asked, did we want to know something? And we said, no what? And asked, did you want to know when you're going to die? You got so freaked out we just pulled our hands off immediately, which I know you're not supposed to do. At that point, we were screaming and not thinking clearly. We got the attention of some of our other friends that were in a different section of the basement, and they came over and asked what the heck was going on. There were two other friends, they were dating and doing God knows what. It's why we banished ourselves to that part of the basement to play this creepy-ass game. Her mom was upstairs. It was the only way they could be alone together if we were all together. We were using a candle because of this. They were doing stuff over on the other side and one of the lights dim. They were playing music, so they didn't really hear what was going on till we freaked out. We did explain what happened to the couple. He wanted to play because he thought it was badass. He literally had to talk us into it by taunting us. He said it's all fake. It's not real, that we're just making it up. We said it's true. It's almost like our egos got the best of us and we forgot how scared we were because we wanted to prove that it was real and we knew strange things. Anyway, when we went back to playing, her boyfriend played but not her. She was too freaked out and went upstairs. Immediately he said, prove that you're real, do something. This should have been the sign that we stopped. It said, get her to play, get her to come back down. It said, I need more of your energy to create something. So her boyfriend yelled, she opened up the door, he persuaded her to come down, and he begged her to play. She relented and she played. It just asked us to put our hands on the pointer and wait. I remember time had gone on and we would say, "How much longer?" And it would say, "A few more minutes." We got to the point where our hands were falling asleep. We had kind of forgotten / speaking amongst ourselves that maybe we should just end it, but her boyfriend didn't want to. Maybe it had been about 10 minutes. We ended up chatting with each other about anything else. That ended immediately when her boyfriend and religious girl started screaming and pointed in the direction of where the candle was. They were facing it, so they saw it the best. They got up as we turned to look. I looked over, and what used to be a normal candle wasn't anymore. The flame was about 6 feet in the air and blue. It was almost hitting the ceiling. We all screamed and ran up the stairs. As we ran up, we could hear a low, gargling, groaning scream that felt as if it were behind you and got louder and louder. All the hairs on my neck stood up. I've never been so terrified. We ran out her front door and just stood on the front lawn, screaming and crying. One girl peed herself. One girl had a white streak in her hair permanently after. It was one of the most stressful experiences we've ever had as friends. The neighbors almost called the cops, but her mom came running out and was so confused and calmed us down. I think the neighbors thought we were just watching a scary movie or something. Our parents all picked us up. We never really talked about it again, just about how scary it was. It was almost too scary to talk about. Now for the creepier part, if you've made it this far. Remember the part about Bruce and Kelly? Because we were in junior high, all the teachers were called by their last names. We found out our teacher and his wife were getting divorced because he no longer wore his ring. He had a tan line there, and someone asked if he lost his wedding ring. He mentioned his separation from his wife and quickly changed the subject. We later found out his ex's name was Kelly and his name was Bruce. We were mortified. However, in time it started to fade. I feel memories, scary ones, feel more like a dream. Even a week after it happened, it didn't feel real. You think your mind is playing tricks on itself, and that's how you get over it. That's how you're able to sleep at night. Those girls, years later, stopped being friends with me. Just like it predicted. I remember getting a Facebook message from one of them in my mid-20s. She asked me about it, if I lost my virginity at the age it said I would / if the name of the guy was correct. She had informed me she and the other girl, the religious one, lost it in the way it said, with the names of the guys it said they would. It hit me like a ton of bricks. We're talking years later, and I had almost forgotten. Trauma kind of does that to you. It said the correct age, my guy's name was wrong though. It predicted John, that felt good somehow. We left it there. I think it made us feel safe as adults, that it was wrong, because it was just all coincidences, right? Maybe the candle wasn't real, we were just teenagers with creative imaginations and remembered wrong. However, that all came crashing down. I didn't realize my European boyfriend's name, if translated, was correct. The name Jan translates to John in English. Sit with that, effing creepy. I never told the girl who messaged me on Facebook. I remembered the safe way we felt and didn't want to take that away from her. I'll never understand why it even matters. It's almost like it told us things that didn't affect our lives at all. Although it did prove that there's something more to our existence. For years, I struggled with sleep paralysis and nightmares that were very vivid. It wasn't until later when I became religious and started believing, and God, it went away. Praying before bed, I got peace. When I was having paralysis or a nightmare, the only thing that made it stop was when I would scream, "Jesus Christ," whether in my head or out loud. Being a religious person now, I'd never mess around with a spirit board. To be honest, I don't believe anyone should use a spirit board. Sometimes I wonder if that's what prompted all my nightmares and those creepy paralysis experiences I had. Mom says every time I stay with her, the paranormal activity in her house intensifies. So I moved out when I was 15 to a different state and had no contact with my family for about 8 years. After that, I started visiting and would stay at my mom's house for a few days. I would notice some things here and there, but nothing majorly creepy. About 5 years ago I started working in that city, so I moved in with my mom. I only stay in that house for a few months at a time, not all year. Here are some of the things I've experienced. One morning I clearly heard people running up and down the stairs, then on the hallway between the bedrooms. They were small steps, like children. I thought maybe my cousins were visiting, but Mom texted me, asking if I could hear that too. She told me she had just woken up and the doors were locked. After a few minutes, I heard a loud bang, my mom screamed, and the noise stopped. The bang was on my mom's door. Doors were locked, there were only cameras downstairs, and they didn't catch anything. Another time we were watching a movie downstairs. It was the middle of the day, and we clearly saw a shadow from the stairwell, as if someone was going from one room to the next. It was just the two of us, and we checked everything was locked. There's many other small stories like that, but the creepiest, in my opinion, was on my last night before I went back home. I was in the backyard smoking with my mom, no one else was in the house. My mom got up and went inside, she then called my name in a weird way, no yelling but not calm, it was weird. I go inside, and all the kitchen cabinets and drawers are open and chairs are moved. My mom was acting weird and scared, and I could see she wanted to cry. I came in 20 seconds after her, there was no way she could have done it and I would have heard it. We started closing everything, and she said, "Thank God you're leaving tomorrow, then I'll be able to rest for at least a few months before you come back." She then told me everything intensified whenever I was living there, she's used to some things here and there, but the house feels heavier when I'm there. She didn't want to say anything out of fear I would stop coming back, she doesn't want to lose me again. I also experienced some paranormal things at home, but for some weird reason they don't feel directed at me when I'm at her house. I don't feel that heaviness she mentions. A demon in my home. I lived in Albany, Wyoming, which is next to the capital of the state, and if you've never been to Wyoming, then it's basically like any other generic rocky state. Known for many of its lakes and things like that, we tend to get a lot of tourists that come down to spend their holidays inward since living here is so expensive. I'm in the United States Air Force, and being stationed on Warren Air Force Base as a vehicle operator, the job practically paid for itself. In days time, I decided I wanted to try living off base after cross-training and figured I should try renting a home that is close to my base. I was still really young, only just turned 22, and when I discovered a simple one-bedroom home in a rural town of Albany, I was ecstatic. Being from Oklahoma and growing up in a rural district myself, I was a big fan of it. This town, however, was really small, you could walk a couple of blocks and you'd be at the end of the town in a matter of minutes, so I would actually jog around the town every morning when I first moved. It was 2014, and I had just moved off base and into the house after getting clearance and getting a rather good deal on the home, which was only $250 a month, and with all the extra money I had, I decided to put a down payment on a new vehicle and thought to hell with it to get my own internet service provider and a gaming computer since I just love to game out and unwind from it, plus the internet service in Wyoming is pretty shit and getting your own provider is a must. It was a simple September, and the first 2 weeks were really great. I was sleeping in my own home, hosting friends for Friday night football, and occasionally attending parties to try my luck at meeting women, as I was still single at the time. It was the beginning of October when it happened. The early night after getting off work, all I wanted to do was just go to sleep. So I lazily brushed my teeth, and within a few minutes, I was already in bed. I laid for a solid 3 minutes, at least, before dozing off. During that time, I had probably the worst dream I would ever experience in my life. Remembering only vivid parts about it, it was something hovering over my bed and something giving the most disgusted look. I couldn't tell what it was, and I can't even give it a sketch. All I could say was that it was horrifying through those few minutes since all it did was just hover over me and give out a very faint whisper, which I don't know what it was saying. I woke up in a very heated sweat and was extremely exhausted from that point. I looked around the room, and it was pitch black. Figuring it as a nightmare, I checked the clock to see it reading 3:50 hours, so it was really early in the time. I figured I might as well get up and take a walk around the town since I wasn't working today and I couldn't fall back to sleep. I got up and put my clothes on, and with it being chilly outside, I took the time to go walking around the town. I'm a paranoid guy, I always have been, so of course I carried my handgun when I went out. It's a M11 Sig Sauer for all you people wanting specific details. I went for my walk, and after a few hours of clearing my head, I felt fine and started making my trail back with it being sunrise soon. When I got back to my house, I found the front door wide open. I will admit that when I knew that I locked my door when I left and came back to find it open, I was shit scared. I felt my heart drop to my stomach, and I know I was pale. I checked the side of the house to see if any of the back gates were disturbed to no avail, and I returned my attention back forward to my home, where I then unholstered my handgun and began a forward advance step a buddy of mine in OC taught me. I entered my home with the gun at the ready, keeping it trained all around but not shutting the door behind me, fearing that the intruder may hear me before I find him. As careful as I could and as slowly as I went, I searched each and every room from top to bottom to find my whole home empty and everything undisturbed. I kept repeating the chain of events when I left the house, trying to find some excuse or a way to think that I may have left my door unlocked or left it open, but I specifically remember putting my key in my bolt lock and twisting it. I knew this because I even kept the key on my person, knowing that I would use it to unlock the door. I didn't know what to make of it and decided that I would change locks out of the front door by the end of the week. A couple of days later, It was around late as always, but since I didn't have to show up at my early hours and got much sleep before arriving, I felt real well and thought about playing some Red Orchestra to the nerd like I am. When I got home, the one thing that stood out immediately as I walked back inside was how hot it was. It was a chilly 38 degrees outside, and my entire house felt like it was around in the 80s. I couldn't believe how hot it was, and I thought I may have left the heater on. I went to check on it and found that it was reading 83°F. I figured I would leave my home tolerable with it being cold, but the heater wasn't the best, and it would only heat up to 75 on a really good day. A fireplace inside was what I used to warm up my home. I couldn't believe it still, which was almost like a shock factor, so I figured that maybe the heater had a good boost and finally started kicking it to gear, and in time too since a snowstorm was preparing to hit eventually. I turned the temperature down and made my way into my bedroom, settling down and basically starting my night of unwinding. All was well in those couple of hours, only when the sudden loud bang of something hitting against my wall on the other side of the room caused me to jump and focus all of my attention. I hesitated and just sat there for around 2 minutes, my breath almost very heavy as I started to feel myself grow pale once again. I didn't know how to react, and once again I thought, intruder. I reached for my pistol, which I always keep in close proximity, and slowly angled it around my room. At that moment, I wished real hard that it was an intruder. Instead, it was nothing, but what I found was a large hole against my wall, and my snow globe onto the floor cracked and the bottom platform of it dented. I quickly searched the rest of my home to find it empty as always, and I started contemplating what it could have been, looking around and continuing to think. I then started to really get nervous when I thought of my dream from before. I thought of it a couple of times, but at that time, when it came to my mind, it caused me to grow really uneasy. I walked back into my room to find my computer monitor turned off. I thought at first it was possibly the computer going to sleep mode, but that faded when I found the back VGA cord unplugged and laying on the floor. I plugged it back in and settled onto my computer chair, gun at the ready on my desk, while I started to look off ahead outside my doorway and into the living room. I got the feeling of someone looking back at me, and it was definitely not a good feeling at all. I had the feeling of someone looking at me with very malicious intent and an extreme notion of harm, but I didn't know what. I had no idea what occurred to me at that time, but for some reason I told myself to lift up my phone and to take a picture outside of my bedroom door. I then turned my computer monitor back on and just tuned myself out of whatever was happening. An hour later, with the real deep feeling no longer there, I pulled my phone out and started checking on what was on the photo that I may have taken, and every time I look at that photo, it freaks me out to this day. I still can't look at it often, thinking of how bad whatever that is looks like. I don't know how this photo did not get lost over the years, but what it is none other than a pair of glowing red eyes staring straight back at me from the outside. I couldn't believe it at first, and I actually even began to hyperventilate. I was shit scared of what it actually was. When I saw this photo, I thought I was going to just run out the door right there. This was the most bizarre thing I have ever seen, and I kept looking at it to see if it was real, and after a few minutes of finally deciding okay, I just went ahead and shut my door, locked it from my side, and slept with my television and light on. The next day, I got up and went to work as normal. Nothing happened in the weeks to follow until December 4th. During that time, I was actually already planning on moving back on base after a few more incidents occurred, mainly seeing things out of the corner of my eye, hearing knocking, sounding of footsteps, and all sorts of other things. I asked the property manager if he knew anything about this, and he went on about it saying he had no idea. That night, though, in December would be my last night staying in that home. I went on normal as it is, settling back on my computer and preparing to play my game. Whenever I heard a noise, I just shrugged it off and simply used to it by this point. At first a few light taps were occurring, and it didn't bother me, only when the light taps turned into a loud slam when it finally caused me to jump and just stare outside of my door. I was hesitant to get up, listening to the silence, when I finally started to slowly stand to my feet and grabbed my handgun as always. I walked around the room, looking off to find my kitchen empty and nothing around, but my light to my bathroom that I always leave on was off. I figured the bulb may have finally burned out, so I started approaching towards it before what I felt was like an extreme burning sensation started appearing on the top of my right hand where I had my gun held. I stopped and looked over, and there I saw what still gives me goosebumps. It was a scratch mark, 3 claw marks on the top of my hand. I started to slowly step back, and from there I turned around and made my way around the small bar table I had on the front of the kitchen, taking another glance up back to the bathroom door when I saw what looked like something so tall, its head touching the ceiling. It was all black, but with distinct features of a huge figure and what looked like also horns on the top of its head. I don't want to exaggerate too much if they were horns, But what made my heart drop was when it had the very same red eyes in the photo staring back at me. I actually rushed back into my bedroom and started breathing deeply, completely afraid of whatever it was. It's a real scary feeling when it's something you cannot fight, something that's completely invulnerable to you. And realizing that I was at the mercy of whatever it was, I made like a pussycat, and damn straight I ran back. I had enough by this point, I was done. I grabbed my phone, wallet, and whatever I would need for work tomorrow, and I was out the door, in my car, and on the road in 5 minutes. I drove all the way to Cheyenne and got a hotel room, spending the night and going to work the next day. By this point, I was fully done with that house, and I outright refused to even set foot back inside. I stayed with a friend until my contract cleared through and my service got me back in the barracks. I didn't go back to that house for another couple of days after that, finally getting the confidence when a friend said he would come along with me to get my things. I told him I was moving since the house was breaking down so I wouldn't scare him while I collected my things. I did it in the daytime and was all wrapped up and finished in an hour and a half with no experiences. Only after we were on the road and heading back to base when I told him everything, and I felt bad for making him go inside since he started freaking out with him being scared of ghosts more than I. Today I'm stationed in Germany and about to go under school for tactical air control party while serving as a telecommunication operator, successfully cross-training. I have a girlfriend and live in a decent-sized flat that, thankfully, is not haunted. I'm doing really well for myself now at the age of 24, preparing to re-enlist soon. I wanted to document this with it still fresh in my mind, and I still talk about it from time to time. Though after all of what's happened, I sure can safely say that the house in Albine was one of the scariest incidents that has happened to me. My friend told me the owner of the home recently passed and the house caught on fire and burned to the ground, so it's no longer there. I don't want to know how or why, I'm just glad that I don't ever have to live with it still up and think of the fact that anyone has to go through what I did. I just want to focus on my own thing right now and let it drift away in my past.